Dear delegates and participants, it is with immense pleasure that we welcome you this evening to Femvest 2022, the second edition of Femvest, the flagship event of HerMoneyTalks. HerMoneyTalks, India's first one-stop financial platform for women, in partnership with Mirai Asset Investment Managers India Private Limited, bring to you this one of its kind e-summit which brings together leaders from BFSI and fintech industries and participants from all walks of life. On the occasion of International Women's Day, with this theme, hashtag Step Out, the objective of this e-summit is to help aspiring individuals, especially women and millennials, to learn more about money management, the options available, the industry trends, and tackle their finance-related challenges, and thereby enhance their financial quotient and confidence. This edition of Femvest symbolizes resurgence, exploration, and a newfound confidence for women and men alike to not only step out of the pandemic-induced freeze on normal life, but also for women to step out in good stride in their journey of financial empowerment. Mirai Asset Investment Managers India Private Limited, the lead partner for Femvest 2022, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Mirai Asset Financial Group. Headquartered in South Korea, Mirai Asset Global Investments Limited also has investment management operations in Hong Kong, United Kingdom, India, Vietnam, USA, Canada, Australia, and Brazil. Apart from asset management, Mirai Asset Financial Group has business interests in life insurance, securities, and investment and venture capital. Mirai Asset Mutual Fund has completed more than 14 plus years in India and is now establishing a stronger foothold in Indian mutual industry. Mirai Asset has made its position strong among the top 15 AMCs of India as of December 2021. Femvest 2022 is co-sponsored by BAC India, ICICI Prudential Asset Management Company, Quantum Mutual Fund, Pahal Financial Services, and Swatantra Microfinance Private Limited. Established in 1875, BAC is Asia's first and fastest stock exchange in world with the speed of 6 microseconds and one of India's leading exchange groups. In 2017, BAC became the first listed stock exchange of India. ICICI Prudential Asset Management Company is leading AMC in the country, focused on bridging the gap between savings and investments and creating long-term wealth for investors through the range of simple and relevant investment options. Quantum Mutual Fund, launched in 2006, is India's first direct-to-investor mutual fund. Quantum Mutual Fund offers simple and easy-to-understand products. We have 2 days of invigorating panel discussions, educative topics, and a much-awaited fireside chat, all delivered by some of the biggest names in the industry. We also have an interesting contest lined up for our participant attending this session. With that, we would like to formally announce the opening of this e-summit, Femvest 2022. Welcome all once again. Over to you, Ritika.
I would first like to welcome Ms. Sangeeta Gupta, Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer, NASSCOM, to say a few words by the inaugural address. Sangeeta started her career with NASSCOM and has been actively engaged in several activities that span across the entire ecosystem for NASSCOM. She has played a key role in various initiatives at NASSCOM, including flagship initiatives like the Indian Leadership Forum, Building the Industry Long-Term Vision, the annual NASSCOM Research Report, the Strategy Review, and the Product, along with 10,000 startup initiatives. In her passion for getting engaged and leading new initiatives at NASSCOM, Sangeeta is also currently leading the Innovation Charter for NASSCOM. Sangeeta has a bachelor's degree in economics from Delhi University and a master's degree in economics from the Delhi School of Economics. extending a warm welcome to Ms. Sangeeta to deliver the inaugural address for Femvest 2020. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ritika, and good evening, everyone. It's such an honor and pleasure to be invited to speak at this event. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all the participants, my fellow speakers, attendees, as well as the organizers that have so thoughtfully put together the second edition of Femvest. HerMoneyTalks is playing such an important role in the area of financial empowerment of women. And I think we must all partner and collaborate to make sure such discussions become the center stage for all conversations and discussions as we think about women empowerment. The theme of this conference, as both Ritika and Manisha talked about, is Step Out. And I cannot think of a better theme when you talk about the whole vision for women empowerment. The last 2 years have been about a pandemic-induced inertia. We are all wondering what lies ahead. But I think the Step Out is the right theme to say the world outside will continue to change. We are living in a never-changing, never similar normal. And it's important we step out and figure out what are our strengths, which are the areas we can take control of, what can we do to excel in what we do, fail, succeed, but keep growing. I think that really is the key theme for what Step Out to me represents. Women and finance have been distant topics in the past, but not anymore. Today, when you see women are taking leadership roles in every sphere out there, we have great examples of women leaders in India as well as globally who are now running large enterprises, who are running very innovative startups, who are running small and medium businesses that are creating very distinct products. And it's so important that the ecosystem is all coming together to support these phenomenal women and their vision and dreams. However, when I was going through a research report and said, what is the problem for financial inclusion and women when you see the two together? I think the data was staggering. There are over 300 million women in India that need financial inclusion and empowerment. Almost, the financial literacy rate for women in India is a very low 20%. That's something that is simply not acceptable. I think 40% of women are less confident in financial matters. 42% women are not even operating their own bank account when they have one. There are less than 20% enterprises that are owned by women. So clearly, it is a problem that we need to go out and address. If India needs to achieve its vision of this 5 trillion GDP, we need to have women playing a much more scalable, dominant role for India's economy than we have had in the past. And financial independence is not just related to having a job, a career, or getting a stable income. It's about having a mindset. You need to be more willing to take care of your finances. So it's not just about I am earning and somebody else is managing my finances and I'm not making the effort to understand what goes behind it. There is the science, there is a maths, and there is the right decisions to be taken. And this has to change. You have to know what and how all of these different financial instruments work. We have some very interesting companies that are sponsoring today's event. Each of them have very innovative financial products that you could go out and leverage to make sure you're planning for your future beyond your earning ages. They are for planning for your today and tomorrow. So my advice to everybody would be take control of your finances. It's good to partner, and each one of us would have either our parents or our spouses or our brothers and or our co-founders taking some of these important decisions. How can we play an equal and important role in doing much of that? And that means getting the understanding. It is not difficult. Some of us just shy away from saying it's complicated. I don't understand what it means. I think just like we put our heart into managing every small activity, whether it's at our work or at our house, we need to put that effort to manage our finances, learn more about it, and play an active role in doing that. I think one needs to start just investing more time and energy. There are lots of online programs that you can attend. I think HerMoneyTalks is a great platform to do that. But ask the right questions, or even if you don't know, just say, I don't know. Can you help explain that to me a little more? I do that a lot all the time, and I don't understand anything. I say, I don't understand the stock market. Tell me what really it means, right? How do I make sure what are the right decisions I'm making about investment? What is a mutual fund? How do I decide what makes sense for me? How am I planning? How do you think about what is my disposable income and what should be my investable income? So these are nuances that are a lot of experienced people have done that. You will find a lot of women role models who can explain that to you, including, a lot of financial experts who are out there. I think another very important aspect of managing finance or money is the fear of mismanaging it. We are living in a very digital world. The last 2 years of the pandemic have taught us that it has been all about contactless payments. I don't know when I last visited a bank branch, or, many of us have, we all interact only digitally. So if you see the digital financial adoption trends in India, India is the largest country in terms of digital financial adoption. UPI payments are touching over $1 billion in value every year. And that's both a positive, and it's also an area that we need to be concerned about. It's a positive because suddenly you don't have to take time out from all your different schedules, managing multi things, to go out to a bank branch, to go and visit somebody. You can go and do it online on your computer. But I think the concern is really the fear or risk of, losing your data, getting hacked, or just somebody defrauding you. So here are a few aspects you need to remember when you are doing a digital financial statement. One is, never share your PIN and password with anyone, whether it's your UPI PIN, whether it's your credit card PIN, whether it's your net banking password. These are really your key assets, and you need to manage these. Second is, even if you get calls, and there have been a number of cyber fraud cases over the last 2 years, posing as a customer care executive and saying your Paytm account, for example, has been blocked due to lack of KYC. And can you share your PIN or your password? And no customer care, no bank executive, no wallet executive will ever ask you for these details. I think the third is really always double check and verify the beneficiary when you're doing a transfer, right? It's very easy to put some one digit wrong here or there, and you can lose a lot of money while doing that. You'll get a lot of people who want to sell you different things. Click here, buy this. Only do it from legitimate sources. Go and make the effort to verify that whom you're transacting with is a legitimate source. Simple things like, when you're shopping online, check if the whole link is, provides you with the HTTPS secure or not. I think change your passwords frequently. These are very small tips, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot more of this during the event. But it's important that just like you focus on becoming managing your finances, managing them digitally, you also think about being safe while you're doing all of that. NASSCOM runs an initiative called the Data Security Council of India. And on their website, you can see a lot of different tips to how do you keep yourself financially safe and secure. I think just coming back to the whole, technology industry, because it's an industry I represent and it's an industry I've worked in over the last 25 years. As an industry, we today employ almost 1.8 million women. It is the largest employer of women in the private sector. And when we looked at, we did a survey a few years back and said, so where are these women coming from? It was very interesting that almost 25% of the women were first generation professionals in the family. So almost 1/4 of the women had never gone out to do a job. And almost 2/3 of them were the primary bread earners for the family. So, you're not doing a job just for your financial empowerment. A lot of women out there are also supporting their families very, very closely as they go out in the world, whether they're doing their own business or they're working for somebody, or they're just doing a whole, gig economy job today. The COVID-induced pandemic has also created this hybrid work models where women have the opportunity to work from home, to take up more flexi working, to do on the few hours that they can work out. So I'm going to stop here and just end with saying, all of you would have heard the quote on step out of your comfort zone and do something big. And, you wonder, what does the step out really mean? Does it mean I have to give up everything I've done? Do I need to do something radically different? It does mean that, but it also means take control of your life from all aspects, your career, your child choices, your finances, your physical and mental wellness, and just about everything. So as we celebrate Women's Day, let's make the effort to step out and start this journey. And Femvest itself is a great platform towards your financial education, learning, and empowerment. So thank you so much for inviting me. And with this, I'll hand this back to Ritika.
Thank you, Ms. Sangeeta. That just sets the right tone for Femvest 2020 and for our journey of financial empowerment as we step into our brave new world post the pandemic. Over to you, Avni.
As we kick off the events of the day with a short educative sessions on an innovative concept of top-up SIPs by Mirai Asset, I request the audience to share their questions, if any, in the chat window. This will get addressed in the subsequent Q&A session. I would now like to welcome Mr. Swaroop Mohanty, CEO, Mirai Asset Investment Managers India Private Limited, for the first educative session of Femvest 2022. Mr. Mohanty is the Chief Executive Officer, CEO, and Associate Director of Mirai AMC. He has over 28 years of experience in the field of financial services, including 20 years plus experience in asset management sales. He is overall responsible for the India AMC. He has been associated with the AMC as head sales from July 2011. Prior to this assignment, Mr. Mohanty was National Sales Head Retail India with Religer Asset Management Company Limited. He has also been associated with
Avni, unmute yourself, please.
Yes. He has been associated with the AMC as head sales from July 2011. He has also been associated with organizations like Aditya Birla Sun Life AMC Limited, Franklin Templeton Asset Management India Private Limited, and Kotak Mahindra Asset Management Company Limited in sales responsibilities. Mr. Mohanty holds a degree in PGDBM and BCom honors. Mr. Mohanty is also a director at the following companies: Mirai Asset Global Investments India Private Limited, Mirai Asset Venture Investments India Private Limited, Mirai Asset Financial Services India Private Limited. I kindly invite Mr. Mohanty to join us on stage to deliver the summit's first educative session on the topic, Step Up Your Investments with Top-Up SIP.
Yeah, thank you, Avni. Thank you so much for the kind words. And I think, what can I say after the first session when it's been so well put? And you know, when you look at the whole concept of Women's Day and you look at the women around you, I've been very fortunate to have been brought up in a house where my mom retired. I come from Bhubaneswar, and my mom retired as the principal of the #1 college in Bhubaneswar. And my father was not he too retired as a principal of the college, but not the best college of Bhubaneswar. So you know who was the boss of our house. My wife just completed her PhD in burnout in finance professionals. I mean, probably indicating at me for all you know. And I have worked with women all my life, and I've had no qualms in admitting that they are not only superior in acumen, but with some women, I've lost out to the amount of physical labor they can put in. So, you know, when I talk about women, and it's not something that it's very true that, you know, you can judge any family, any society, any surrounding, any organization by how the growth of women happens in that particular sort of environment. And at Mirae Asset, with 39% of women around us, is just getting special by the day. So on behalf of Mirae Asset, I'd like to congratulate all the women out there who are going out and stepping out as we speak by the day. And it's such a pleasure to be in a country where women are what they are, and they teach us by the day. So it's not because of Women's Day that I'm saying this. This is something which I believe in, and it's our absolute pleasure to be with HerMoneyTalks in second year in running. And thank you so much for including us in your great event. And I hope we as an organization can give some of our expressions back to you in the form of wealth creation. And when you look at wealth creation today, I thought I'd pick up a very simple topic because it is being talked about a lot. And the systematic investment plan has become a go-to environment, go-to investment behavior for Indians across, and that's reflective of the figures that come in on a daily basis into the organization. And we, with an 870 sort of crore SIP book per month, are witnessing some incredible inflows on like I said, on a daily basis. But when you look at SIP per se, it is supposed to be a cash flow solution to investing. You have some money per month, so you put it into your investments on a monthly basis. It is a very good process of owning the market on a regular basis. It leads to disciplined participation, and finally, on a long-term basis through rupee cost averaging, the ability to own the equity markets or the debt markets or the capital markets is generally what leads to wealth creation. But this is how the process has been. I believe it is time that we graduate from that process and convert SIP into a definite wealth creation tool, step it up a bit, and start viewing SIP in a way which can be very meaningful to your wealth creation process. And when you look at that, I think one of the most powerful ways of doing it is by taking into account what we call a top-up mechanism. A very normal top-up mechanism is by increasing SIP or the amount of SIP every month. The other way of topping it up is probably to add some more money in a lump sum manner to your SIP in a regular phase. And the last one, which is a beautiful hack of SIP, is your loan versus SIP. And I'd like to discuss these three topics very, very quickly as we speak. And the first one, do you know that, if you just added a bit to your SIP every year, what would happen at the end of your SIP journey would be very special. I mean, just adding up, say, 10% over and above your investment amount every year can lead to a very different result to what you think your SIP result normally is. And that's something which I'll explore in the next 10 minutes. Because just by adding 1,000 rupees per month, your investment journey can differ dramatically to your erstwhile 1,000 rupees. Now, when you look at just adding that 1,000 rupees, what used to be a 72,000 rupees total investment per year can eventually lead to 2,52,000 over a period of time, over the fifth year that you're investing. That's how a small amount can differ in your input of the SIP. Please understand, most of us focus ourselves on the behavior of the market. But when you invest, what you need to focus on is your behavior, and concentrate on your controllables. What is controllable is the amount of money that you put in, which is subject to your risk profile, of course, and the amount of cash flows that you have. But sometimes just a small 10% top up can make a huge difference in the way you invest and your total outcome. That's how much 1,000 rupees per month can sort of change in your overall SIP. And here's my favorite story. Then let's look at a 30-year-old professional. We have Samir in our office, so we based it on Samir here. Suppose Samir is a 30-year-old professional and he wants his retirement, and his retirement, he wants to reach a goal of 5 crores. So the first option could be to start an SIP at 9,000 rupees at 15% an annum, which is typically what the equity investor looks at. You can, look at your own sort of return and go to the various SIP calculators there that are in front of you to arrive at your sort of journey. But what at 60 it would give you at 15% compounding yearly would be a 5 crore sum. The other option which Samir could do is add 500 rupees more. That is, the 9,000 rupees SIP goes to 9,500 from the next year. And it would take up the annual sum by 1.8 crores more. That means the 5 crore that he had targeted, by just adding 500 rupees more, which is not anything great from a pocket perspective, can lead to increasing that amount by 1.8 crores. His sum would go up to 6.82. Now, sometimes we might think, okay, I don't have 9,000, what do I do? And that's where the beauty of top-up comes in. He can start a 6,000 rupees SIP and add the same 500 rupees per month from second year. And suddenly he would reach the same goal of 5 crores. So as per your current inflows or your current outflow that you can afford, or your surplus that you can afford, you can add a little bit more. I mean, 500 is not exactly 10% of a top up, it's far less than 10%. And surely a person who can afford 900 can change the expense statement to accommodate 500 rupees more. And just a mere 500 changes the entire sort of maths by a huge margin is the point I'm making. So I would really request all of you to inculcate a habit of step-up SIP at the beginning of the SIP itself. Sometimes what happens is the markets go down. You cannot do anything about it. What you can do is just increase your SIP amount a bit and still arrive at the goal that you looked at, because your goal is more important than anything else. Now you've planned for a certain expenditure over a period of time, and when that day happens, the most important thing that is for you to do is to have that money. Now, more often than not, you concentrate on the market's ups and downs. If you shifted that view to this part, you can still reach your goal, or maybe at times you want to reach that goal a little ahead of time. You can use the step up or top up SIP route to a brilliant impact. So like by rule, do not do an SIP without a top up. And when the markets sort of fluctuate, I inculcate a habit of adding some more a lump sum into it to hasten my wealth creation process. This is also a kind of a top up, or this is also a kind of a step up. I mean, in days like the last 5-6 days, I mean, for no particular reason, which are impacting Indian balance sheets, the markets have been behaving in a certain way due to a war. Now, if the war is perpetual, money will not be very important. Let's be very honest out. But if the war ends at particular point of time, the markets would reverse is a reality. And at that point of time, it will depend on how much you participate in the market in these levels, which will define how much money you get on the upside of the market. That's pure mathematics. Now, one is, your existing SIPs are going and you hit a monthly SIP. But there is nothing stopping you from adding 10% that amount in these falls. And the final figure, as I've explained in the last slide, can be pretty dramatically different. I mean, suppose you are investing 900 rupees and 10% of that is in 9,000 rupees SIP, 10% of that is say 900. Just add 900 or 1,000 rupees in this fall, nothing stopping you from doing that. And then that's how you sort of change your wealth creation pattern. Coming to the next one, how to use this is my favorite slide. And that's something which, please, it's a humble request to for all home loan or car loan or any user. When you look at a loan, there are two parts. There is the principal part and there is the staggering interest part. How do you invest in a way where, just a little bit of top up in that entire part benefits you? And look at it. If you invest just 10% of your EMI in equity mutual funds via the SIP route, the final outcome can be pretty staggering. Like say, suppose my EMI is 40,000. I'm asking for a top up of 4,000. Suppose my EMI is 20,000. I'm asking for a top up of SIP. EMI on this side, but an SIP of 2,000 on the other side, right? And let's look at some of the results. Suppose your home loan EMI is say 43,000. What we are asking you to do is just start an SIP at 3,000 rupees. That means your total outflow will be say 46,000 or 47,000. What will happen is your home loan, if you take a 50 lakh loan as say a rate of interest, these are examples, of course, the rate of interest are different, so you can calculate them on your own. If you are at a rate of interest, your EMI for 30 years is say at 43,000 odd rupees. What you pay after 30 years is a total payment of 15 lakhs, 1 crore 57 lakhs. That is 3 times more than what you borrowed. That is what the interest component does to you. Your total interest is actually 1 crore, which is double that of your borrowing amount. And your principal is 50 lakhs, is what you've borrowed. This is pure mathematics. The interest component is your killer. And that's the price you pay for borrowing money. No wonder if you go back to the earlier days, the king used to borrow from the moneylender, and eventually the moneylender started owning the kingdom. This has happened in the past. And then sometimes if you look at some of this history, why money lending is such a big business is from the banking system. Generation days, it's there because the interest component is the cream. How do you then kill this and move it to your advantage? just start a 10% SIP. And I'm assumed, say, an expected CAGR return of 15%. Here, if you expect a CAGR of, say, 12%, now the home loans are at 7% too. So it's the same sort of difference that I'm talking about. And let the SIP tenure be of 30 years. The value of this 3,000 rupees SIP after 30 years at 15% CAGR is actually 2 crores. Let it sink in. Just 10% of your EMI amount. And actually, you are left with a surplus of almost your collection amount or your home loan amount. This is something which my colleague told me just a few years back, and this is something which I started practicing. And I thought it's a powerful way of utilizing the SIP and helping it find a solution to your cash flows. So just before I end, just two takeaways. A lot of us think of becoming, or getting a crore of money. I'll leave behind one mathematics on this and how they differ. Now, if you did an SIP of, say, 35,000 at an expected return of 10% for 10 years, your SIP amount at 10% would be, say, around 67, 68 lakhs. But you've topped it up by 10%, that is 35,000, means you add another 3,500 next year to the SIP. Then you would reach 1 crore in 10 years. That 30 lakh difference is what this top-up gives you. That's the power of a top-up. So please do not start SIPs with a top-up. Gone are those days when you would approach SIPs like the mundane 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 rupees a month without an outcome in mind. First, put a goal in your mind. And if the markets vary in a certain way, add a top-up to your advantage to reach that goal. Please do use the home loan or the car loan hack to benefit from this onslaught of interest payment that you make. And look at converting your SIP going forward through this very simple hacks into powerful wealth creation and, more important, solution providing mechanisms for your own finances. Yeah. Again, wish you a very happy Women's Day, all of you, and thank you so much for your time. It's back to you, HerMoneyTalks.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mohanty, for that wonderful and very insightful session on stepping out to take charge of our investments with top-up SIPs. We now open up the Q&A session. Audience can share their questions for Mr. Mohanty in the chat box. So, sir, we have a few questions.
Yeah.
So first is, what advice would you give to women and girls in college to manage finance?
See, it's not about women or anybody. I'm just fascinated that somebody in college is asking for finance. That's amazing for me to hear. Because if at your age, when I was in college, if I would have just invested 500 rupees per month, today I would be financially free. I'm 51 today. That's how little money is required for you to start your finance. First, when you lead your life, you have certain goals in your life, certain wishes in your life. First, jot down what you want to do in your life. And as life progresses, they might change, which is fine. But first, put what you want in life. As you put your wants in front of you, and they become your goals. And once you know what you want to do, and how much money you want, where to invest becomes easy. Otherwise, it's a mindless journey. So for me, at that age, most important to the lady who's asking me, my first thing is, you have the world in front of you. First, define your life. It can change. If that changes, your plans can change. But first thing, put your life in perspective, define what you want to do. World is very different now. And for the young, who are now shifting from financial assets to experiences, like my son doesn't want to buy a house, he doesn't want to buy a car, and they're right in their own places because of the Ubers and community living in place. Their outlook towards life will be totally different to the way I looked at life. But that is their life. So define it first, fix your goals. Once you fix your goal, a financial plan is there for you. But it's the goal which needs to be fixed, which is most important. And trust me when I say this, 9 out of 10 investors who are investing right now are goalless. So please fix your goal first.
Thank you, sir. Our second question is, can you please suggest some YouTube course to learn about all this?
I didn't get it. I'd put a timer, sorry. Yeah.
Like if you could suggest a few courses on different platforms that we could use YouTube or Coursera.
See, I think it depends on whether you want to build a career in financial investing or financial planning, wealth management. It depends on that you need to do courses. But if you want to know about investing, I think Google is the best course that you can. There is adapt to. There is no question that you have in your mind about investing which is not already answered on Google. So I would really suggest that, spend some time, fiddle around on Google with your questions. It'll be amazing how many people in the world have the same questions as you. Once you figured out what you want to do, now if you want to build a financial services career, then you come out, do an MBA, do a CFA, CFP, CFA, CA. Those are, pretty great courses in front of you. But just for investing, I would suggest first find your path. And then once you Google around, you will find your way. Courses don't sort of define things much, is my opinion. First, find out what you want to do and then go for the right education.
Thank you, sir. Our last question is, how do you add a top-up investment on bad days?
Yeah, it's called a lump sum investment. You can buy 1,000 rupees. At least some funds have 500 rupees. Some funds give you an addition of 100 rupees. If you are buying stocks, you can buy one stock. If you buy an ETF, you can buy one ETF. So there are ways of adding money every day on the thing on all platforms. We call it lump sum, not SIP. I can add 1,000 rupees for Mirae Asset any day I want. So just go onto the website, go to your distributor, go to any of the distributable online platforms where you are investing through, and say you want to add some more money. It's a very easy process, and in this today's digital world, it's just 5-6 clicks away actually.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mohanty, for taking the time with us. We truly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Manish.
So much for your time.
Have a great day ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mohanty.
We now come to the PhD resistance of the evening, an absorbing panel discussion on consumer behavior and customer experience before and after the pandemic. It promises to be a fulfilling and insightful panel discussion, replete with invigorating exchange of ideas and a balanced dissection of market behavior. We have with us highly accomplished panelists here today, whom I would like to take this opportunity to introduce. Firstly, it is a pleasure to invite on stage Mr. Mayuk Datta, Product Head, Mirae Asset Investment Managers India Private Limited. Mr. Datta has experience in sales, business development, account management, credit appraisal, receivables management, vendor creation, and management. His exposure in mutual funds and insurance has given him a rich grounding in retail financial services. He has been managing frontline sales force in terms of driving and motivating people to achieve targets and involved in people development. Welcome, Mr. Datta.
Thank you.
Next.
I hope you can hear me. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Next, we are delighted to welcome on stage Ms. Reena Nathani, Chief Business Officer, Quantum AMC. Ms. Nathani has over 20 years of experience in building businesses, advising companies, and leading teams to successful outcomes. Prior to joining Quantum AMC, she was a director in KPMG's advisory practice in the US and head retail businesses at Suminter India Organics India. She has done masters in management studies from Janalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies. Welcome, Ms. Nathani.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me here. And it's great to have so many ambitious and eager women to learn and be here today. Thank you.
Next, I would like to welcome on stage Mr. Pratik Oswal. Head Passive Funds, Motilal Oswal AMC, and CEO of Glide Invest. Mr. Oswal is currently the CEO of Glide Invest, an online investment platform. He also heads Motilal Oswal Mutual Fund's passive funds business, ETFs plus index funds. Before this, he was heading operations and finance at a Series A fintech startup in San Francisco, California. The company was backed by prominent investors such as Y Combinator, Khosla Ventures, Anthemis, Chicago Board of Exchange, and many others. Apart from fintech, he has experience working in investment banking, PE, and hedge funds. He has studied math and economics at Emory University and has an MBA from LBS. Welcome, Mr. Oswal.
Hi, thanks for having me. Thank you for the kind introduction, Manisha. Looking forward to this today.
Our final panelist for this discussion is Mr. Anuj Khaka, co-founder of Frio, India's first credit-led neobank. A serial entrepreneur, he successfully co-founded and exited his previous startup, SkillWiz, where he worked on developing a skill assessment platform, which later pivoted to TapStart, a job discovery platform. He has spent his early career years in advertising, where he worked with top agencies such as Lowe and JWT. He has spent 5 years in the telecom industry, working in marketing, sales, distribution, and product, and has been the head of customer acquisitions for Airtel's Karnataka Circle. Welcome, Mr. Khaka.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, sir. Our moderator will be Ms. Nisari Mahesh, founder and director of HerMoneyTalks. Nisari is an IIM Bangalore alumnus, former banker turned writer, and entrepreneur with over 19 years of industry experience. Nisari has 7+ years of corporate experience in banking and insurance, and 10+ years in communications and branding. Nisari is also a mentor at various women and startup platforms. The topic of today's panel discussion is the Great Pandemic Before and After, a dive into fintech, consumer behavior, customer experience, and BFSI industry. As we kick off today's exciting panel discussion, I request the audience to share their questions, if any, in the chat window. These will get addressed in the subsequent Q&A session. Over to you, Ms. Nisari.
Thank you, Manisha. Welcome, everyone. It's our pleasure to have you all in this evening for an interesting and much insightful panel discussion. It's been 2 years, the great pandemic stuck all over the world. I know we all are now even bored of hearing the word pandemic, but it's a fact that a lot of changes has happened in these 2 years. When some of the sectors, some domains face the downtime, others have boomed, and even the financial services industry is one such. And the important change has happened in the way consumers behave. There are a lot of changes in the way people buy goods and services and the way businesses started operating, just like we are zoomed now from different parts of India together for an e-summit. And now the question is, what's next? How businesses in this financial services and fintech is gearing up to these changes, expectations, and challenges. I welcome my panelists once again, Anuj, Mayuk, Pratik, Reena, to an energetic panel discussion for this. I know all of you are seasoned professionals in the respective fields, so I'm sure this panel discussion will bring out diverse views and interesting insight. So let me get to the discussions. I start from the alphabetical order. My first question is to Anuj. Anuj, you are building a credit-led neobanking at Creo. You have seen the startup and the fintech world very closely. There are a lot of competition in this field in this last 2 years, especially the fight between the traditional banking and the neobanking. And I would like to know how fintech startups have evolved their business strategies to acquire customers and convince them to this digital world.
Sure. Thanks, Nisri. In school, you typically have your surname as your roll call. So I've never been the first guy. Because with K, you'd be somewhere in the middle. Never have gone first because of Anuj. But anyways, good to get started. Yeah. So listen, I think as far as neobanks are concerned, this is a new concept in the world of fintech and finance in India. And it's not something that a lot of people had heard of before, but last few years has seen a lot of this happening. But the way specifically to your question of how has fintech evolved, maybe I can give a generic answer and then maybe bring it down very specific to my industry. Maybe that will help. I think in the last 5-6 years, essentially, people have moved to say that if I can get groceries in 5 minutes on my phone, if I can get a cab in 5 minutes on my phone, why can't money be as easily accessible, available, transferable to me? And it's not something that's new. I'm not saying something that people don't know on this panel, or maybe your guests also know it. But actually, to action that out has been very, very tough, because at least in our country, the banks have played that role, and and they have played a certain very different kind of role, and they've obviously moved ahead and done a lot of work in the digital space. And the joke going around WhatsApp was that the pandemic was the CTO or CIO of banks, because it forced them to figure out how digital world would be. But the need for getting into digital services has suddenly sort of shot up over the last 5-6 years, right? So, and last 2 years, you see a lot of people invest their money. So suddenly you see people have more money in their bank account. So what do? I can't go and spend it anywhere. So let me go invest it. So investment products have taken a boost. People have started to look at insurance digitally. Credit obviously has gone up. It's always been an underserved market. If you look at all the cards that are talking about in the market. So I think it's just the digital aspect of it has really taken off. So UPI, for example, does about $100 billion of transactions a month, while cards actually do about $20 billion. So it's a 5x growth. I personally would otherwise use my credit card and go and tap the POS machine, but these days I probably use my UPI more. It's just become a habit. There's no scientific basis on that, but it's just become a habit for me to now not touch the POS machine, right? So people's behavior has sort of evolved over the last few years, maybe more so in certain urban areas and maybe differently in maybe other semi-urban areas and maybe in the 1,000 city in the country. But as far as say banking as such is concerned, 30 years ago, pre-1990s, the 95% of deposits were with public sector banks, right? And then the private banks came, HDFC, ICICI, Kotak. And what they did is that they essentially, with better products, better services, better branches, an AC branch, somebody could walk in and be comfortable. Phone banking, SMS banking, mobile banking, it took away 30-35% market share. And we believe that as the needs of the customer evolves, and that's where going back to my earlier point of where you can get you can get groceries and cab on the phone in 5 minutes. Why not money? As the needs of the customer evolve, the banks will also get involved. So you put all of this together, your need for being digital, maybe boosted by the pandemic, you want services on the spot in your house, and the way products and services have become better and better and better. I do think that the fintech industry is seeing a pretty big, large boost, and that's going to continue over the next 4 or 5 years. But I want to caveat this out that it's not that we are growing or we will continue to grow at the behest of banks going down, and that's not our view from day one. We've done credit products, we have spending products, and about we have pay later products in 1,000 cities in India. We have banking product where we take deposits, but we work with bank partners, right? So bank people have the smartest folks. Honestly, they are really, really smart people across the board. So it's not about they killing fintech or fintech killing banks. I don't think that's going to happen very soon. Both have to play to their strengths. And that is something that we firmly believe in, and we'll keep working together. So we have our own licensing in, say, we have an NBFC license. Tomorrow, if a digital banking license comes out, we'll take that as well. But that does not mean we'll stop working with banks and existing banks to be able to offer better products. We will play to our strengths, which is probably product, data, technology, customer. They will play to their strengths, which is maybe balance sheet, regulatory, and a lot of other things that they bring stability to the market. So I think they're interesting times. The macros have definitely helped. At the top level, the macro is helping. At the bottom level, the accessibility is helping. And then all of this has just been boosted by the pandemic. So good time to be in the fintech world.
I guess it's more of a co-creation between the banks and the digital platforms for better customer experience. Yeah, and of course, I'll come back to you because that's one question I had about the trust factor. Like, how do you build trust among the customers? I'll come back to you. Now, let me move to Pratik. Pratik, apart from the responsibilities in Motilal Oswal, you head Glide Invest, an online investment platform. So who are your target customers here? And what is that one key change of customer experience you are addressing here?
Sure. Firstly, good afternoon, everyone. Basically, just to give you a little bit of a, analogy, I'm extremely inspired by fitness apps. Fitness apps are great because, back in the day, if you had to say become fit, you either had to go to the gym, which I think is time consuming. I mean, it's still good. I mean, I still do that. And the other way is to basically, have a trainer come home. And now what we've seen is with these fitness apps is that, fitness is actually democratized. You can get good quality advice, you can get diet plans, you can get exercises, you can have live video, on these apps, which can really help you in a low cost way, get to fitness. So I think that's, somewhat of an analogy of, what we're trying to build at Glide Invest. If you look at the wealth management industry, it's very interesting because, I have been a part of the industry for the last 10 years. But the problem is that, I only, because I am in physical form right now, all I can focus on is really wealthy people, so unfortunately, the entire industry, focuses on people who are 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs, 50 lakhs, 1 crore above, because to be honest, below that, it doesn't really make sense for a wealth manager or an independent financial advisor to go out there and meet customers. So that sort of segment is pretty crowded, and there's also like a lot of good stuff happening there. But what about everyone else? I mean, what about the guy or girl who wants to do 20,000 or a 30,000 or a 40,000 rupee SIP? Where do they get good quality advice from? Where can they create portfolios? Where can they do their goal-based investments? And this is going to be most of India's population, unfortunately. So I think that's where sort of Glide comes in. So I mean, the idea is that can you offer a platform that offers great quality advice, at obviously a good cost to all our customers and help them create their wealth. The technical term is robo advisory, but no one really likes using that because it's too technical. But the idea is to build a guided-based investment app, which really helps customers to do their goals and all of that, invest into portfolios. So that's basically what we're trying to do at Glide in terms of I think the customer segment, or at least I mean I spoke about that, but in terms of what is happening to customer expectations, at least well, I can't. So I used to use the word post-pandemic about 6 months back, and I stopped using it now. But basically, what we've seen in the last 2 years is that customers are at least they are becoming a lot more smarter about I think investments, which I think is great. I think people ask a lot more intelligent questions and a lot more well-read, and also they're a lot more demanding, especially the active user base and at least the people I speak to on a daily basis. So that's one thing which is great. Financial education has exploded. And I think everyone today can get access to high quality education online, on YouTube, on Google, all of that. So I think that's one trend which I think is great. The second is that people have become a lot more knowledgeable about finance in terms of, but people are not really very knowledgeable about risk, which is sort of concerning. People don't know what a conservative investor or what an aggressive investor is. If I have different plans, people tend to go with the one which is the highest return, and I think a lot of investors who have come in over the last few years have not really seen a bear market. So I think understanding of returns is there, about products is there, but I think risk is something which is a lot more important, because ultimately what will really create a big difference in your career is not your own understanding of risk and how much of risk you're able to take when you're investing in these products. And now you have stuff like crypto and all these things which are very sort of I think risky, and most people should probably avoid it. But still, I think because of that, even expectations have gone up in a very big way. Lastly, and I think this is something which is also a good trend, is there's also this movement towards trust. I think like a lot of customers, want, they don't really care about how good or bad your product is, but they want to go with someone who they trust very deeply. And I think that's the first question, when you're onboarding a customer into your own mutual fund or into any app. I think trust is the biggest barrier out there. And I do think that companies and individuals who go out there and create trust, are the ones who are going to do really well in the future. So I think those are the 3 or 4 things which I've seen at least change in the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay, so I think you are, if I'm right, you're trying to make investments more like a lifestyle. So anybody can invest through, apps without taking advice or seeking out for advice. Something like do-it-yourself kind of style is what you're trying to build here.
Yeah, so in fact, do it yourself is great. That's an excellent trend that's happening. People are learning themselves and doing it themselves. But there's also a segment that is not really has a time to do it yourself. They don't know what to buy, what to sell, how to go about building your asset allocation or your goals. I think it's more towards the second crowd where you're still a little bit clueless about how to start investing.
Thank you, Pratik. Now I'm moving to Mayuk. Mayuk, you have been managing frontline sales force and driving the sales team. So you have a pulse of what the market is demanding. So what are the changes you see in investor behavior over the last 2 years when it comes to mutual funds in particular?
Okay. So hi, Nizri. Thank you for having me here. See, the last 2 years, it's a reference for so much content that you can go deep into that. But overall, if you look at it, last 2 years also gave people a lot of time to also check where they are on their investment scale in terms of what they hold, what they need to plan and their investments for. So that was the first thing, which was an input part. Earlier, what was slightly procrastination, people got the time and they also understood the need to have a proper set of array of products or investment, let's say, vehicles in their portfolios. That was 2 things which came out very strongly. For example, people understood that they need to invest for their emergencies. They need to keep some money aside. They need to have an insurance. And so these things were more so, let's say, peripheral discussion, but the time and the need was very much evident in front of everybody. So they went into that discussion. So that also happened. What that led into is that a sort of a lukewarm awareness, immediately people leapfrogged into product discussion. And that's something which has happened, which Pratik also talked about, that people immediately started looking into what is the best performing products and so on, and just get into that. It also, and that is nothing wrong about it, because 2020 also showed people that there is merit, at least on the equity side of investment, that if you stay invested, you can make a return. So what was an experience of March 20 in terms of markets coming down, in 6 months, they saw that staying invested makes sense. So all the more reason to keep on investing and so on. What is slightly off tangent is that the discussion straight away went into where to invest rather than why to invest. So the reason of discussion was that while everybody understood that they need, for example, everybody understood that they need to have something keep aside as an emergency fund, just for an example, because that people would understand. But why they could understand, but they did not have that same understanding for all their investments. You could have an emergency fund, but also need a retirement fund, right? Or retirement kitty. But instead of having a discussion of why I should have a retirement kitty, everybody went into which is the best performing fund. At least when I talk about mutual funds, it could be for mutual funds, it could be for a bank deposit, anything. Everybody went into what is looking good, great right now, rather than what is fitting me, what is useful for me, which will take me from point A to point B. So the question which we would always say is that the why is more important. Once you know the why, you know what to do. And unfortunately, people understood how, which is mutual funds, which could be insurance, which could be many other things. But nobody wants to discuss the why, because the why becomes, and the why is very universal. So therefore, it looks boring. Which scheme, which product is more tantalizing? The content, the bombardment on your phone, on your laptop, on your newspaper is always about which scheme, which product. I would rather have is this last 2 years would have also led to some sort of understanding that why you should invest, because once you know your goal or what you need for that money for, once you put a purpose behind that money, then it looks not about X percentage return versus Y. It looks about that A vehicle will take me to B point, and that reaching B point safely, soundly is very important for me and for family, or for, let's say, legacy money and so on. So I would have thought that the last 2 years has made awareness, but the awareness leapfrog towards straight away to products, it's slightly disconcerting, and you will find that happening right now as markets are going down, because you went into some scheme understanding it was looking very attractive then, may not look attractive right now. So that's where the situation is, I would say, at this point.
So I feel the awareness has to be created, not just in terms of the products, and what happens after that also is important. I'll come back to you with the same question. So now to you, Reena. Reena, we have been discussing here about the changing behavior or the changing aspirations of customers. Reena, you have been leading the team for 20 years, at least last 20 years, which would mean that you have a great connect with your stakeholders, and you know you're well versed with various business strategies for brands. Now, given the way the retail investors think today, what can businesses do for this? What is the takeaway businesses have from this?
Sure, thanks, Nisari. I think as everyone, the panelists just highlighted, there's been a lot of change in consumer behavior. And one big thing that has happened, or the pandemic has really fueled the digital sort of transformation, the ability or the adoption of digital. So I think the new normal is being formed, and it's up to companies to really shape that new next normal in some sense. And it's really important for companies to now follow the customer through the customer journey, engage with them where the customer is now moving towards, and your marketing spends, what you do, really should reflect that. I think the other big thing that has been the case for a while now, but is becoming more prevalent, is making sure that businesses are omni-channel and that they're consistently talking about the same message online, offline, at every interaction point. Because as Prateek mentioned, it's really about building trust and doing what you say, saying what you do, and making sure that that trust reflects in everything you say and do and how you communicate. Of course, with that trust, really, you got to build loyalty. The stickiness of the customer is essential today, as even Mayuk mentioned. People follow the next trend. What's the hot thing? It's not about just returns. It's also about what is the risk involved? What are your financial goals? Just because your friend or your relative or somebody said to do it, it's not necessarily the best thing for you. How do you do that through customer relationship management? How do you do that through content, through communication? And I think the other thing is, it's really the time for businesses to educate and, kind of do that heavy lifting to increase that awareness around these kinds of concepts, the downsides, what happens, the importance of having an emergency fund, the importance of diversification, and things like that. And I think as that progresses, we will see the DIY investing, we'll see people a little more mature when it comes to the retail investor. And that's where businesses really need to capitalize on.
Thank you, Reena. I think all of you are pointing towards one thing, the need of awareness creation. And now I'm feeling like we are in the right space at HerMoneyTalks by spreading financial literacy and awareness. I'll circle back to you. Now let me go back to Anuj. So this was one question I had in mind, especially when I was reading and all about neo-banking concept. Anuj, you have in your corporate career and your startup stint, you have had the experience of mass customer acquisition. So when you talk about customers today, how do you build that trust in the customers to move towards neo-banking platforms? Because I think, okay, the millennials, maybe they are more easy to go with neo-banking concepts. But when it comes to others, when it comes to mass customer acquisition, what are their expectations? How do you build that trust factor?
Right. Honestly, trust is something that is nothing to do with today or, tech startups, not tech startups, traditional, non-traditional, it doesn't matter. The great HUL or Colgate and in those years, ITC, they've built their entire businesses purely on trust, wherein, they have to sell their products to a channel partner and so on and so forth. In today's digital world, of course, you don't see a face to it. So, it's maybe tougher to build trust, but, just the way people have adopted digital products, whether be it, chat or doesn't matter. This is my favorite example that I talk with, we've gone through a lot, our industry's gone through a lot of, something or the other keeps happening. And then the point of privacy and a lot of these things come up, right? At the end of the day, a cab driver knows exactly where my office is, knows where my house is, how much money do I have. The food delivery guys knows my door, what the color of my door of my house is and my office is, what do I eat every day. And then we worry about, saying that, hey, some different kind of products, and, I don't want to make it political or anything like that. But the point is some of the other products should not do this, should not do that. And end of the day, of course, you have to solve for people's privacy and you have to respect it as long as you take consent. But a lot of these products today people have adopted in droves, right? Where I'm comfortable giving my home office address and my friend's address or my parents' address if I go and order food there. So, we've learned, and, we've within our own boundaries, we've figured out how to manage trust. My dad, for example, still does not trust UPI, surprisingly. He thinks that I'm not going to put my bank account details or my debit card details. I'm not going to do that. And it's so tough. He actually opened a new bank account to put a little money there so that he can use it on UPI, honestly. So I said, okay, no problem. Get started with that. Right. So I think trust has just been an issue or something to solve for from day one across everything else. And I think the way we are looking at trust is not about, it's not about brand building. It's not about putting ads on IPL. Of course, that helps. But really, it boils down to a very simple statement as what you promise is what you deliver. And as long as you can consistently do that, your trust will get built one way or the other. Sometimes it may happen quickly. Sometimes it may take time. We also have loans in our portfolio as a bank, as a neobank. You have to, you take loans as well. Unfortunately, in the credit industry, as the panelist before this was talking about it, the number of people who you give it to, you approve, is far lesser than the people you reject. Unfortunately, you reject more than you let go of, right? And you get bombarded by requests on social media that, hey, you're cheating me and this and that. But that's just my responsibility. I should not give you credit when you don't, you're not able to pay back. But you know what? It doesn't matter because I am saying I will not give it to you and I don't give it to you. So that is also building trust. And we've seen that over a period of time. Right? Our names are synonymous with some people trust us. So I think the bottom line is not fancy stuff of, putting, privacy, some logos, etc., which you have to do, by the way, because at the end of the day, you have responsibility to the customer. But the bottom line is that you deliver on what you say. And it's not easy, right? You have with sometimes you take shortcuts, sometimes you don't take shortcuts, sometimes there's some pressures where you say, let this go. But if you consistently deliver on what you do, trust is going to build up and people will talk about it. And I've been a big believer of this. I've before jumping into the tech startup world, I've worked with traditional businesses where we've done retail, distribution, sales on the ground, and all that's all built on trust. And it just takes 1 minute to solve it. So as long as you keep doing what you say, you're fine.
I come from a credit background, so I know it is difficult to build that customer experience and trust in the credit industry. Like you rightly mentioned, the rejections are more. So right. That's why I was wondering how you manage, especially a credit-led neobanking one. I'll come back to you.
Yeah. I think, like I said, I will tell you, I tell people we will reject you and we go ahead and reject you. So yeah. I guess we're okay.
Okay, thank you. So I'm moving to Mayuk now. Last 2 years was very challenging in the financial services industry, especially the mutual fund industry, like market fluctuations, regulatory issues, significantly growing number of investors due to increasing awareness. I would like to know how the BFSI has adapted to these challenges amidst meeting customer experience, especially people to make them stay invested in the industry.
So, Nazari, I would break up that into 4 quadrants of what has happened. And that's a personal observation, quick. So first one, 2 of them are very customer centric. First of all, as I talked about it, the awareness somehow has increased in the last 2 years. So there is a lot of content which is being and engagement being done by investors and customers when it comes to financial products. So they are watching content online, they are talking to their distributors, they are talking to their advisors, they are reading up, they are following videos. There is YouTube is full of such influencing universe, and people are engaging there. So there is an awareness. Whether the awareness is in the right stages of education, that is debatable. You can debate about that because it's about products, about concepts, about retirements, about financial planning, and so on. But people are engaging on that. So that's one good part. Second part, when I look at it, is that as people are getting engaging, there is definitely the requirement of managing our fiduciary and regulatory roles. So that is only going to go up as number of investors are going up. So I see a lot of that happening also in all our businesses. On the whole BFSI as a category, I see only regulation going up, which is actually good for the industry because that brings in the trust part. It has to be an equitable and industry which is fair and based on rule-based for all of us. And we don't have any, because unless there is rule-based, there is no reason or for anybody to trust each other. So that's the second part. I see a lot of that happening. Third, I see is that a lot of the back end happening, and that is already happening, which Anuj is also a part of, where we see banks linking to RTAs, linking to payment gateways, so that ease and convenience of transaction and also the number of transaction going up will only go up. So the backend has to be very good, and it has actually come up. In fact, in the last 2 years, most of the time we have not been available physically. Yet transactions and number of investors across BFSI has only gone up. 2 years back, if I talk about the mutual fund industry, the industry had about 1.5 crores of unique PAN numbers in the industry. Today, it is nudging 3 crores. So that number is only going to go up. So unless you have the backend ready for this sort of transaction going up, it will not happen. And the fourth important part, which has happened because of the first part, which I said, which is again circling back to investors or consumers, is that while everything has been closed, you look at it, they are interacting with all the service providers, not by the traditional methods. Today, our Twitter handle would be probably getting more customer feedback than anything else. So gone are the days when an investor would actually be talking to a email ID or a contact us or a help us. So feedback on experience, on products is 24/7. It's universal. It is being put up on a social media platform for everybody to read and understand. Those are the changes which I think are coming up very strongly across BFSI, and I do not talk about only mutual funds. So today it is very, for example, just to complete with an example, from a banking point of view, if you are unhappy, probably it is not that you would go to your RM or walk into your branch and talk about your problem. You'll probably tweet about it fast because you're sitting at home. Anyway, the branch is closed, was possibly closed earlier. So that's where now, even if the branch were to open up, I would still continue to tweet and give my feedback about my service experience. Doesn't mean that the branch will go up, because that's how the last 2 years has changed my feedback loop back to the universe. So I see these things happening a lot in our industry.
To add to it, I hope the mutual fund industry will be the much criticized industry, because even if a 50% down is happening in crypto, nobody is bothered about it. But even if 1% down is happening in NAV, it is much discussed about.
Which is fair, which is even 20 years back, mutual funds were as much a unknown black box as crypto is probably today. Now that awareness has gone up, so naturally the feedback loop will also be higher for mutual funds, which is absolutely understandable.
Okay, thank you. Now my next question is to Prateek. So like we discussed, there has been a drastic changes in the financial services industry working today. Now, as we all discussed, the focus is on ease and experience, not just in financial planning, but in staying invested. So how do you think the online platforms or the digital platforms can help? It will be helpful if you can elaborate a little bit how the online platforms or the robo platforms can help people stay invested.
Yeah. I think in terms of changes, in industry, I think, before we go to the online platforms, let's look at what's the biggest change in industry, at least. So I've only been there for 3 years, so, I can't talk about what happened before. But basically what I've seen is that the mutual fund industry used to be primarily a B2B industry. where your customer was a distributor or an advisor, whereas you were never really in touch with the end customer. And this is about, say, 4 to 5 years back. And what has happened since then, the last 2 or 3 years time, that now, mutual fund is not only a B2B business, but it's also a B2C business, where you are in touch with customers, you are talking to them on a daily basis, you have a big customer support team, you have, queries coming in thousands a day. So I think with that respect, there's it's as an industry has become a lot more complex, and a lot of times it's sort of not great because as someone who sells mutual funds or who sort of educates people, I'm not allowed to tell people what they should buy, what they should sell, or what their allocation should be. So I think the biggest change has been that this B2C aspect has been quite new, and it's good because it really helps smaller investors to come in and sort of have their sort of wealth creation needs taken care of by themselves. In terms of these platforms, I think what has happened is, because more and more customers are coming in directly, before there was this huge problem of access. How do you buy a mutual fund? It was fairly complicated. You have to fill forms, you have to go to the mutual fund branch, all of that. And now what has happened is a lot of these platforms, these mutual fund apps that are out there, they've really helped in removing a lot of barriers and making it super simple for anyone can just go out there and buy a mutual fund tomorrow, set up SIPs, buy and sell mutual funds, stocks, various products. So I think a big sort of pain point in the industry, which was there about 3 or 4 years back, was access. And now we don't really have that barrier anymore, because it's just become so much easier. In fact, a lot of mutual fund companies are now struggling to keep up with the technology stack that all these apps have. So I think their customer experience, user experience has been quite superior. So I think these are some of the things where it's really helped. I think the next layer in terms of I spoke about it earlier. After you provide access, you have to be able to provide advice. At least to customers who really don't know what to do with their investments. I think Mayuk said something very insightful, that people know how to do it, but they don't know why to do it. I think that advice layer can really help investors with the why, about why are they saving, and also it also helps them keep with the investments, because what I've seen is a lot of people get very excited to invest. I want to invest, I want to become financially stable, but then when the markets are flat or down, people lose interest. People sort of go and come back. So that that discipline is somewhat lost when you don't have a plan in mind. And I think a lot of these platforms can hopefully have that discipline in place, so that investors keep with their investments, and sort of keep making those contributions month over month in their investor profiles. Lastly, also there's a lot more communication happening from the AMC, so I think that's also a great thing. A lot of emails being sent out. I think as someone who talks about mutual funds, I say my job is to sort of selling time, not really mutual funds, because I have to ask my customer, the investor, to really hold on to the investments for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So I think you're selling compound interest, you're selling time, you're not really selling a product. And I think as more and more AMCs do this sort of education bit on their own, that'll also make a big impact towards getting investors to stay to their investments over the long term.
Thank you, Prateek. So I'm continuing that thread. I'm back to Reena. So like we mentioned, in this do-it-yourself world, what are the pros and cons customers should be aware in the current fluctuating market scenario, where there is a lesser hand-holding or a complete risk profiling is unavailable?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, in this do-it-yourself, environment, the biggest thing is the information, like analysis paralysis, what you would say, right? The more information you have, the more confusing it can be. There are hundreds of mutual funds out there. Even if you've understood your risk appetite, your goals, how do you know which mutual fund is right for you? How do you comb through all that information online to be able to, decipher it? So I think the key thing, or where content is moving, is really about making it simple, looking at personalizable, content. How do you actually give the reader or the user something that is so targeted through his journey or by his actions, that it actually is content that is bite-sized, that is relatable, that is relevant. So I think the challenge is going to be for customers to understand what content to follow, what AMCs to follow in terms of trust as well. You may have people throwing out new trends, right? Or talking about trends. It equates to, again, sort of saying, am I following a herd or am I doing what is right for me? So from the customer side, I think they really need to be careful about what they're reading and how, whether they're actually understanding the intent behind all the information. As far as the business goes, it goes back to, again, that education and that giving relevant content, keeping things simple, understanding or doing what's in the benefit or interest of the customer versus just, your goals of profitability, etc. So it's going to be challenging to see whether companies actually do what they say and say what they do, and how that reflects in actions as opposed to just the digital interfaces where you're, saying something and doing something else in some sense.
Thank you, Reena. Actually, we are running short of time, so I'll put a quick question for any of the panelists can answer. So we were talking about digitization, which means most it is catering more to the urban crowd. Now, when it comes to any digital platforms, whether it is neobanking or mutual funds, still the penetration to, say, the semi-urban or the rural is much less. It's less than even 20%, which I guess. So when it comes to, again, another question is, I'm just adding that also to it, when it comes to women customers. So far, we were generally talking about the trends, how it is making things easy and all. So two things, when it comes to the semi-urban or the rural population to create awareness, or to improve to adopt more women consumers to the changing trends in the fintech. What is the industry doing right now to, help them to adopt more products and services? Anybody can answer. Yeah.
Okay, let me go first.
Sure.
I think on the industry part, I see a lot of things happening on the data analytics where people would be, if you have today people who are buying through platforms or have their engagements, I think at a traditional way of buying financial products, and also by a tech platform, that when you today, if an Amazon can say that other users also bought A, B, C, and I was buying D, I think that to be happening on the financial services also, saying that this is what you need and this is what the data suggests that you should be investing into. So I see that to be happening going ahead very quick and fast, and already some of the peripheral players of this are already doing this data mining, which is trying to figure out what has been my investment behavior till now, and therefore what should I be doing. Maybe sometimes that behavior is detrimental to what I need to do actually. It's like having junk food while I'm not supposed to have it. Similarly on investing also, maybe buying something which I'm not supposed to invest in, or probably do something which will help me stay on the goal. So I see that to be happening a lot. And it is, when it comes to women investing, just to quickly answer your question, I would say that I would have seen in anyone, when you look at our course of life, when we meet different people, I have found women investors to be far more goal oriented than I would have said any male investor I would have seen. If any investment in our lives, if the mother had to put up some money aside, whether herself or through the family or through the father, they would have ensured. And if it was, God forbid, for an education or for a marriage, then come rain, hail or sunshine, it would be done. So probably I would have seen, in my personal experience, I would say that I've seen ladies to be much more goal oriented than probably men are. And that's to their benefit. In fact, a lot of communication and ads you would see would actually circle around this factor at a very tacit level. So I always think that's an advantage which probably we need to understand. But that goal orientation and data analytics, two different parts of what you asked about, but I see a lot of things happening.
Yeah,
just
go for it.
Sorry.
No, go.
No, I was saying, just to add on the women's side, I think what's interesting is we're seeing the younger lot educating themselves more, wanting to become more financially independent. They're moving from the traditional gold and fixed deposits to a little more mutual funds is in fact very popular amongst women. I read somewhere almost 79%. You're seeing that shift into stocks, into more riskier assets. They're moving away where they're not saying I'll depend on my father or my brother, etc., to handle my husband to handle my finances, that I can learn and do it myself. So that trend is very encouraging. And again, it's more, how do you educate these women to understand, the basics of investing, and how do you keep it simple for them, and how do you, through their journey, make them more thoughtful investors, if you will, so that their long-term wealth creation goals are, achieved. So that content and that engagement through the customer journey, not just for women, but for any customer, is really going to help them, achieve their goals in terms of investing and finances.
Thank you, Rita. Pratik, you want to add something?
No, just the fact that, this obviously is a great forum, and we need to promote these sort of forums because they really help, women come together for, something specific. I have done, hundreds of these in the last 2 years, and what's unfortunate is not a lot of women, come for these sort of events. So I think it's good to see, more of these things happening. Apart from that, also, coming from learning from the US, I think a big trend out there is, having platforms or advisors who are focused on, just women only sort of, goals oriented or portfolios, which I think could be a good option, for India as well. So I know about 3 or 4 platforms in India who are specifically focusing on women-based investment goals, and platforms which I think the communication needs to be slightly different than what you have on an average sort of investing app or something. So I think those are some of the things which I think are changing and are getting a lot of women to enter the industry and invest. I think as you see more and more women enter the sort of professional industry, it's very important, at least, I keep telling people, and this is, I think across, if you're a woman or you're not, if you look at a lot of wealthy people on the planet, I think there's one single thing which is in common, is that it's not like they get wealthy on their job or their salaries. They get wealthy because of ownership. They own stocks, they own mutual funds, they own real estate. So I think ownership is extremely important. And if anyone wants to get into I think becoming financially independent, you have to own stuff, either your own company or, or stakes in other companies, or, whatever it is. So I think I think education is happening, but, I keep sort of reinforcing it.
There's a lot of change because we started in 2019. At the time when we started, there were very less discussions happening. People were more keen on investment products like an FD or a gold. Now we see when people, even women, are asking about crypto in the various platforms. Last year, we have conducted around 300 programs. In every program, there will be one sure question about crypto. So things are changing. That's a good sign. In fact, I wanted to ask a lot of questions, but we are running short of time, so we have to wrap up now. I think a lot of questions have also come in the chat box, which we need to address. So before that, thank you everyone for this wonderful and lively discussion. It's been truly a pleasure to have you all over here. Thank you. Now over to you, Avni, for the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And thanks to all our panelists for that wonderful deep dive on how customer expectations as well as experience have shifted, driving changes in the industry. As we are running short of time, we'll quickly move to the second panel discussion. And if time permits, we'll surely address the questions that have come in the chat window. And also participants can mail the questions to contact us at @HerMoneyTalks.com. So over to you, Avni.
Yeah, so we now come to the second panel discussion of the evening, anchored by our knowledge partner, Athena, eLearn, an e-learning platform providing learning in housing finance, credit information, and behavioral skills. This panel promises to be an equally absorbing discussion on women and credit. We have with us highly experienced industry leaders as our panelists today, whom I would like to take this opportunity to introduce. First off, we take pleasure in inviting on stage Mr. Jayesh Shah, Director, Operations and Credit, Swatantra Micro Housing Finance Corporation. Mr. Shah started his career at HDFC, India's leading housing finance company. Over his 22 years career with the firm, he worked across all major departments at HDFC. He joined Micro Housing Finance Corporation (MHFC) in May 2009 as part of the initial team to help extend the existing market-based housing finance model to include customers from weaker sections who lack documentation, and has been instrumental in establishing MHFC's overall systems and processes. Welcome, Mr. Shah.
Thank you.
Welcome, sir. Next, we are pleased to welcome on stage Ms. Purvi Bhavsar, co-founder and managing director, Pahal Financial Services, and director, KIFS Housing Finance. Ms. Bhavsar is a first-generation entrepreneur who started her journey as an entrepreneur in the year 2011. Prior to this, she has worked for various corporates for more than 17 years by venturing into NBFC MFI business with 12 branches across Gujarat. Pahal has touched the lives of more than 8 lakh households belonging to marginalized communities by providing them credit for income-generating activities. Welcome, Ms. Bhavsar.
Thank you.
Next, I would like to welcome on stage Ms. Hema Ganapati, Chief Operating Officer, Sundaram Home Finance. Ms. Ganapati is a senior banking professional and a Lean Six Sigma black belt with over 15 years of extensive experience and proven leadership skills in managing pan-country functions and large teams in credit, finance, operations, strategy, controls, and process re-engineering domains. She has expertise in digital and fintech tools, credit initiation, retail operations, risk assessment, and process transformation. Welcome, Ms. Ganapati.
Thank you.
Our final panelist for this discussion is Ms. Simmi Sareen, Director, Unitas Capital. Ms. Sareen is a chartered accountant and an MBA from London Business School with 23 plus years of financial services experience. She is working on a series of interventions to champion financial inclusion and climate tech ecosystems in India. At Unitas Capital, she leads the debt advisory practice and helps financial services firms, social enterprises, and climate tech businesses get access to relevant, timely capital from a large network of domestic and international lenders. As co-founder of Climate, she is building a growth platform for early-stage climate tech startups to access markets and innovative financing options. Climate also publishes collaborative research on gaps and opportunities in climate finance. Welcome, Ms. Sareen.
Thanks, Avni. Glad to be here.
This session will be moderated by Mr. Satish Mehta, founder Athena Elon, and founder director Sibyl, and founder of Athena Advisors, a boutique consultancy firm consulting in the areas of mortgage finance and credit information and bureau. Mr. Mehta's experience spanning over 40 years in the areas of housing finance, consumer finance, business development, training, credit information, and management consultancy has resulted in the creation of India's first credit bureau, Sibyl, and he has extended invaluable expertise to the fledgling financial infrastructures of countries in South Asia and the Middle East. Prior to founding Athena, Satish worked with the Quantum Group as CEO, Dun & Bradstreet Dubai as President, Financial Infrastructure and Credit Bureau, Credit Information Bureau, India Limited, or Sibyl as MD, HDFC as General Manager, and Piramal Capital and Housing Finance Limited as COO. Welcome, Mr. Mehta.
Thank you, Avni. Thank you.
The topic of today's panel discussion is Women in Credit, an overview, facts, trends, and challenges. As we kick off today's second panel discussion, I request the audience to share their questions, if any, in the chat window. This will get addressed in the subsequent Q&A session. Over to you, Mr. Mehta.
Thank you, Avni. Thanks for that introduction and welcome everyone. Good evening. We're running a little late, so I'm going to jump straight into the questions and the discussion. So let me start by, since this is a predominantly supposed to be a more women-oriented discussion, I'm going to start by addressing my first question. to the only male on the panel. Jayesh, this question is for you. Credit penetration level for women customers. I mean, we have one micro housing finance person, we have one microfinance person, and then of course we have the other two panelists bringing their experience in. So what is your view on the credit penetration level for women customers, especially in the urban and rural areas?
Sure. So I would talk with perspective of the micro housing finance, this thing. So it's not as much as in microfinance, because microfinance is predominantly lending to women. But if you were to compare the normal housing finance, like what Ms. Ganpati would be doing, or maybe HDFC does, or some other housing finance companies does, to that compared, I think the micro housing finance has a lot higher percentage of women borrowers than the normal thing. If I were to take the case of our example, we would have about 75% of our loans which have women borrowers, and not only women borrowers, they would, out of that 75%, 65% would also be women owners of that property.
All right, thank you. Emma, can we get a similar perspective from you at the other end of the scale in terms of the non-micro focus, in terms of what is your view on women penetration, especially in the urban and the semi-urban areas?
Yeah, thanks, Satish. So, while we have a lot of women population, like Mr. Shah rightly mentioned, in the microfinance sector, we do have a good penetration in the home loan sector as well. Given that the real estate is looking at growing, and given that the interest rates are at their lowest ever, the women are coming a lot forward and availing loans. I would say the penetration is close to 30%. And there are a lot of government measures which are in place to encourage women borrowers as well, because they get better benefits on home loans. We have a PMAY which requires a specific woman to be a part of the ownership. Then, we have lower rates for women. So there is a lot of things which is taken as a perspective from the government also to improve, or make it better for women to borrow. So in that space, I think we are making good progress, while we have a lot to cover as well.
Great, thank you. Simi, if I can move on to you, how do you feel the lending industry looks at women customers, whether it's home loans, personal loans, business loans, education loans? Is there a positive or a negative view that people have, specifically if it's a woman who's coming forward to borrow, given that we have government focus and incentives for the women borrowers? What do you think is the lending industry's internal view on a woman walking in for a loan?
So Satish, I kind of split that question into several segments of borrowing that women need to make, right? And as Jayesh mentioned, and as Purvi will probably tell you, that especially with microfinance companies in rural areas, there's a specific focus on women borrowers, with almost 95% borrowers being women. Now, when you go beyond that to say, look at women business owners, like micro businesses and small business owners, and what's the credit penetration of women there, at that point of time, you have to be aware that the penetration today is quite low. Jayesh, give me 1 second, please. So penetration there is quite low, not because the lenders have a positive or a negative bias. In fact, the bias is potentially slightly positive, given the fact that there are government incentives. But if you look at, say, credit teams within banks who are making those decisions, I don't think there's a bias towards or against women in making those decisions. The reason we have a lower penetration of women business owners in overall credit, I think, is a problem of the pipeline. There are fewer business owners approaching banks compared to, say, the men business owners approaching banks. And I think that's the problem that we need to address if we have to address the women credit penetration. I don't think as a lenders, there is any bias that I have seen in decisioning process.
Great. And I think you're right. As business owners, definitely the percentage of women is much lower. But if you look at the retail side, increasingly women are having servicing capacity to take a loan, they're owning the house, they want a credit card, they want education loans. So I think, as you rightly said, the pipeline is a problem, but we definitely are beginning to see the beginning of change.
Yes.
If I can come to you now, and I know the microfinance industry is unique in that sense in a positive way, because as you rightly said, women are the predominant borrowers. But do you think it's a social issue primarily across the country still, or you think we've left that behind now? About women not being the dominant applicants for loans.
You want me to answer it from the microfinance point of view?
Well, your experience is so huge that you can cover
Yes.
the whole range. So I'm happy to listen to you.
Okay. So for this particular webinar, I'll restrict about my experience related to microfinance. And I think microfinance is one financial services which, where the eligibility criteria itself is being women. So even at an industrial level, the kind of numbers that we have reached out to is phenomenal. Only the microfinance industry, the group lending, excluding the SHGs and the money lent by NABARD, the portfolio is about 2.5 lakh crore, reaching out to close to about 6 crore women borrowers across all the districts in the country. So that is the width and spread of the microfinance. And like as I said, being woman is a prerequisite for taking a loan in microfinance. So I don't see any social issue or any such problem there, because more or less now, even in the smallest of the villages, this is a very acceptable practice that woman is borrowing. Mostly they use it for their own purposes, but they also in a lot of cases have been supporting their husband or some male member in the family. So I think that social taboo or social acceptance is no longer a challenge or an issue in that segment.
And if I can ask a follow-through question to you, if you were to expand it to the non-microfinance sector, do you then see a kind of a bias or a kind of a, a feeling that, the women are not as welcome to come in for a loan as, say, the men are?
I tell you, it is, very surprising, because before even I got into microfinance, and I'm sure it's a myth, or it is, most people do not know that rural, illiterate or a very semi-literate kind of woman with no understanding of finance are the most savvy customers, and it's very surprising. But when it comes to urban markets or literal population, literate females, I think it is not about they not being accepted or they having any difficulty. I think it is more of a mindset, with women, that they are not very keen to borrow, or they're not very confident to borrow. And also our social system is such where, the assets are generally not created or inherited by women. So when it comes to borrowing against or buying a house, that becomes a bit of a challenge. But I don't think, as Simi very rightly said, there are no such biases from the lender point of view.
So you're saying it's actually working reverse, where the supposedly more educated and savvy women of urban India, or the savvy men of urban India, have not really broken through to giving women more loans than what the supposedly rural part, which is the less educated or the less advanced. So Simi, I have a question for you on that. Is there a pattern as to what kind of loans do women take? And I know you said about businesses not being owned by women also. But do you see a pattern of what kind of loans do women take and what kind of loans they do not take? And is there a pattern of that we can map, or is it just random depending upon the economic situation?
So speaking, beyond microfinance on the, I would say more peri-urban, urban women, and I think across the spectrum of credit that women would need, I think in terms of, I would say the absolute other end, highly educated women who use technology well, who are on the fintech platforms, and, talking to, say, people who run peer-to-peer lending platforms, for example, especially focused on the, I would say the younger set, say people who are taking, extremely short-term credit cards or loans for vacations or, loans for, say, weddings. All of those, I think women are as savvy and as aware and as on the curve in terms of taking a loan. I think where we've seen less penetration, I think that's definitely a pattern, despite government coming up with schemes like the Mudra scheme, which is specifically meant for women to come in and take a loan. We have found that women business owners is one pattern where they're reluctant in general to walk into a bank and take a loan. I think a lot of it is driven by, this general perception that I think all business owners have, that banks typically lend against collateral, and women typically don't own collateral property in their own names. It's usually owned by the family or owned by the husbands. Or even if they do, we have had women business owners say that they're not comfortable offering the family property or a joint property as a collateral, and hence are not comfortable in taking a loan. There have definitely instances, though I know that's changed a lot in the past 5 years, when women have gone to banks for, say, collateral backed loans, with banks looking at, their spouses, getting added on as co-borrowers, and women are generally reluctant to do that when they're taking their first loan. So I think we have definitely seen, lower penetration among the bank loans for businesses. When it comes to retail loans, there really isn't a pattern. I think, especially when it comes to, say, loan against gold, women do own the gold, take loan against that, especially when it comes to retail loans, credit cards. There doesn't seem to be, low penetration or a pattern that works against women there at all.
Got it. Yeah, that's interesting. Hema, if I can come to you, and you probably know why I'm preambling the question, purely your personal view, women loan takers face a lot of challenges, especially when it comes to credit norms. Your thoughts on that? Not necessarily housing loans, generally, on auto loan, for example.
Yeah, thanks, Satish. So, while we have a lot of product offerings which are now available, specifically catering to women population, there's a lot which still can be done on the credit norms perspective. If you see some banks and NBFC today, they don't show much of a difference in credit norms when we underwrite a male customer or a women customer. But most of the financial institutions also come under the societal biases, that prevail in the credit norms. Say, for example, if an unmarried woman wants to avail a loan with her dad or a mom, it still does not pass through as a straight-through transaction. Of course, the transaction does get approved, but it does get approved as a caveat, or it does get approved with a deviation. So, that said, institutions are still looking at making gender agnostic policies, given that the credit behavior among women is much better.
So you're saying basically that there are some biases, but they are not the norm, or they are not the normal policy.
Yes.
And that's good to hear that, because I think it's an evolution and that's not going to happen overnight.
If I may add, Satish, I think what's needed is not gender agnostic policies, but gender positive policies, right? Because as Hema rightly mentioned, these are not policies, these are biases and societal biases. So I think those need to be, talked about openly. And basically, I think the gender lens in terms of lending norms to say that, pretty much like microfinance is done, not to say that only women can take a loan, but, when you're lending, you need to consciously strip away those biases so that credit officers are aware that even unconsciously, they are not deciding on a loan because the applicant is, say, an unmarried woman, or a woman who's setting up a business on his own and does not want to bring her spouse in as a co-borrower.
That's interesting, definitely. Can I come back to Purvi? Purvi, is there something that the women should be looking out for in terms of the kind of loans they can take, and what should they try and avoid? And the second question that will come from that, which I'll throw open to one of the other participants, is what is your view on the P2P lending platforms that have come up more recently? So Purvi, can you kick off the answer with, is there something that what is it that women should be careful about, besides the normal thing that every borrower should be careful about?
Okay. So I think I wouldn't say that there is something really additional that they should look for, but my general, from my experience, I can tell you that, they are not very savvy with finance. So they generally don't pay much attention to, the rate of interest, the way it is calculated, the kind of liability that it would, create, and their serviceability, which I'm sure most of it would be seen by the financial institution lending. But, those finer details where whether it is a processing fee or other charges, things like that, they generally don't pay much attention. Those are the kind of things that they should take care. Otherwise, I think like any other normal borrower, everything remains the same, nothing very specific.
Sivi, if I can ask you the next question, which is that, with P2P lending and all these fintechs coming up, and you keep reading about, applications from certain countries being banned en masse and, people getting frauded and all that. Now, when it comes to women, as Puri said, who are a little less savvy relative to some of the men, what is your advice to the women on this in terms of falling for these kind of, traps? And of course, again, it's not about lending. Every day you read somebody's credit card got hacked and somebody was offered something and 70,000 rupees went away. So what is it that one needs to do? And this is more an education process, which I'm sure Naisari is listening on into and, hopefully doing something about it also. And we are now knowledge partners with her. So we will work on this together. But fintechs, for example, and this is, again, not necessarily women oriented. It is something I would like to address to the larger audience of men and women.
Yeah, so I think one thing, Satish, that fintechs have done is that credit is easy, right? It's available to people who were not earlier afforded credit, like so new to credit people, young students, people who may not necessarily have a lot of income proofs. And I think the important thing for anyone taking a loan is that you should not take a loan just because it's available, right? I think the most important thing that any borrower needs to decide, a man or a woman, before taking a loan is this a loan that you absolutely need and can afford, right? Because the easiest thing to do is that you want to go on an expensive holiday or you want to buy like an iPhone that you cannot afford and you can get an easy loan against it and you take it, right? But the repercussions of not being able to pay it on time are that your CIBIL score gets affected, that it affects all your credit taking ability for the next many, many years. So I think the important thing is that, only take a loan that you can afford to take and can afford to pay on time every time. I think that's like the single biggest caveat of loan taking, frauds excluded. But now coming to fintechs and, all the malpractices we hear about, I think beyond the obvious, do not share passwords, be careful with the information, make sure you don't respond to phishing calls. That's the more obvious ones. But I think, as Purvi said, I think in loans, it's also about, being very aware of what the terms are. Because lenders sometimes speak a language that people don't always understand, right? Is it a flat rate, which may be like that, you're quoted a 10% rate, but actually the IRRs are like 40%. Are there things getting added? For example, one thing that we hear a lot about, for example, in payday loans is that the interest may only be 12%, but because they're charging a processing fee of like 2% for a 40-day loan, you're actually paying 30%. So being very aware of what the actual cost of this loan is extremely important.
Satish, I also want to add one more thing, which I think most women particularly don't pay attention to, is signing the legal documents. They generally, don't read the documents as much as they should. I don't expect that, most people read all the documents, but at least all the critical documents, all the agreements, all the papers that whosoever is making you sign, at least you should understand what exactly you are signing. And I see some gap out there because most of them don't take it that seriously. You make them, wherever you take their signature, they are very happy. They'll sign it very happily, not ask many questions there.
They just want to check and get out of the office, kind of.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think the regulator also has tried to address that with the most important terms and conditions being highlighted separately into a document and all that. So Jayesh, if I can move on to you on this question, on two back-to-back questions for you. One is this buy now, pay later fashion that has started, which is a surrogate, if I can say, for credit cards or whatever it might be. That's another thing which kind of, the earlier generation never borrowed. And this generation feels that they got to borrow as if there is no tomorrow. So is there a balance that needs to be struck? Are people like, I had a secretary once, she was earning X amount of rupees and she had 5 credit cards. Now I have 1. And I asked her, what do you do with these 5 credit cards? She said, it just feels nice to have them, I used the scissors after that, but that's a different story altogether. But how do you balance this buy now, pay later? You walk into a electronic store or you walk into a clothes mall or whatever, and I'm getting facilities to buy. Everybody's interested in making me buy, pay later. Is that a potential debt trap?
Well, Satish, yes, but the what we need to also understand is that it's not the way they use the credit cards is not the way that you and I would use a credit card. For them, there's a lot of mis-selling. I mean, because they get included their EMIs deducted from the bank account. There's a lot of data that goes out to potential lenders saying that there's a person who's actually has this income, their banking transactions, and therefore they become eligible for these credit cards and small easy loans that Simi was talking about. And the credit card, we've seen so many customers, almost 50% of our customers who have credit cards, and they never used it. But when they used it, they didn't know how to pay back that amount that they've used on the credit card, and therefore it's sort of written off, and their CIBIL scores are affected and all that. And when we ask them what happened, there's a default on the credit card. He says, no, I don't remember. Then we show him the report, and here's the report. It says that, oh yes, I remember. Someone sold me a credit card, and I never knew what happened, and I never even realized that there were some annual charges that were deducted. So there's a lot of mis-selling and a lack of understanding which has led to this whole thing. More often, these credit cards that they have, they're actually used for withdrawing cash. They're not going and walking into stores and using the card to make purchases or anything like that. So it's actually, for them, it's like someone called me and offered me a free card. So I was like, wow, I mean, I can get a card for myself. So that's the point. And yes, definitely, it's definitely leading to, overdebtedness, because, again, when we started in 2009, our average, income to installment ratios were in the range of 30-35%. Today, I would really be extremely happy if I find a customer with those kind of ratios. And now that we have also looking at lending in the rural areas, to my surprise, the ratio is even higher in the rural areas. The credit penetration in rural areas in this segment is even higher. So it's definitely something which is a cause, and I think it'll probably the markets will take care of that. I think rather than any regulation or any this thing will take care of that. But coming back to your earlier question, I wanted to answer that when you said biases and credit norms, right? I just wanted to share my experience on that. When we started micro housing in 2009, the idea was to give loans to people who are financially excluded. And mostly when we thought what we meant by financial exclusion was that because they didn't have documented incomes, they would be the ones who would come into us. But to our surprise, we got a lot of women borrowers who came to us saying that, why, though they had formal slips and, some formal incomes, they were turned down by other banks and, housing finance companies because they were single women. They were, unmarried, women staying with parents or applying with parents, and they were not eligible for loans through those organizations. But that number now has come down significantly. So I'm sure the norms have changed in other institutions where they don't, send them to us now.
And I think this is a personal view I have, and it was kind of alluded to by some of you. So I wanted to put this question to Hema. We talk about interest rates and we talk about affordability and all, and this applies to men sometimes more than women. Nobody realizes that the most expensive form of borrowing is the credit card, with the kind of interest rates that they charge. I'm sure most of us on this panel use credit card as a convenience and pay off on the day it is due. But there's so many people who are paying exorbitant rates of interest, and there's compounding and there is interest and all kinds of things happening. So for some reason, there has been silence on that part of the education, about using credit cards very selectively and with a huge amount of, discreetness, because the interest rate on credit cards is anything 30 plus 40 sometimes, So Hema, what can be done to educate generally people? I'm kind of opening it up for men also, because it's a crime to be, I'm one day late and I get hit with a 40% interest rate.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Satish. So, whenever we look at any kind of application that comes in for underwriting, the first thing that we see is what is the credit card, how much is the utilization, and so on and so forth. So there should be proactive educating of the applicants to ensure that their utilization ratio is actually lower. When we mean utilization, it's, how much they spend across their limit. So that said, the number of credit cards, while, it does add to a good credit score if you do maintain a good payment track record, but it still adds again to the number of liabilities that you hold, and more so if you're going to be revolving on that, or more so if you're going to take cash against that. So, the thing is, we'll have to educate customers, but, to ensure that either they have a good debt burden ratio or they reduce their utilization.
But Purvi, if I can come back to you, and it's a belief I have, is that as you go down the economic scale and to come to microfinance borrowers, whether for housing or otherwise, does disposable income available after meeting basic needs as a percentage, I would believe, is lower than what it is for somebody earning more, because there are some basic expenses, school children's fees, even though they might be at the lower end. And in spite of that, as you rightly said, the tendency sometimes is to give higher loan installment ratios to people in that bracket. Now, does that reflect in the performance of the portfolio, or is that a myth that I have which needs to be broken?
I think it's a myth. Because if I talk about microfinance, the recovery ratio or the recovery rate for the entire industry, barring those difficult events like demon and now Corona, it is always in excess of 99%. So I would say, in whichever part. So even if there are, some natural calamities, there is a flood or, I'll just give you an example of, place like Bihar, which I give a number of times, and I would love to give that example here also. In Bihar, there are at least 1 or 2 months where the flood is bound to come. People do not have money to, pay for their food and all, but your EMIs, they would still end up paying their EMIs. They are staying on the road because, the entire village is flooded. They can't get back in their home. But in most cases, they would take that small, boat or something, they would still come and they would pay their EMI. So even in those difficult situations, on-time collection of EMI would be in excess of 90%. Only 5 to 10% people who for some reason would miss out on their EMI, and within 30 days, they would make good that EMI as well. So I think, and this is also partly to do with, the psychology of women. They are generally very, very scared of missing out on their repayments. And, they would start preparing and they know that this event is likely to happen, every year in the month of August or September, this is bound to happen. So they will save money in such a way that, they will be able to service their EMI. So I think it is a myth as if you look at the microfinance data per se.
In fact, and I hate to admit this because there are, the majority of it are women on the panel, but women are always known to be financially more responsible than our men. And therefore, I think what you say is absolutely valid, especially at that segment, which you are dealing with.
But Satish, even if you look at the data at an industry level, the NPS, so 90 plus bucket at an industry level, women borrowers versus male borrowers, the NPAs are close to about 5.2% for women versus about 6.9% for the male. So even, if you extrapolate that at an industry level, I think women are supposed to be the best borrowers and best repayers comparatively.
Sounds good.
To add to this, what Purvi said, I completely agree. It's a myth. And, I'll give you an example from the post-pandemic, as we're coming out of the pandemic. I mean, we've seen our repayments coming back to pre-pandemic levels. And one of the reasons why it has happened is because our, counseling with the women of the house. I mean, they are the ones who actually started paying part EMIs, full EMIs. And, we've seen a tremendous, recovery in that. And I think the decision to stay, continue to pay whatever amount that they can afford was majority of women's decision than a male's decision in our case.
And on the other end, Satish, all the large NPAs we've had and all the CBI cases and frauds that we have kind of seen in the last 5 years, I haven't seen a single woman borrower there ever.
Right. So, Simi, that brings me to something else. Do you think that the industry is doing enough to collectively educate and counsel people right from the process of taking a loan, who to borrow from, what to watch out for, all the way to encouraging women ownership and then repaying your loans on time? Is there something that needs to be done at a collective level? I know every organization does its own bit that's required. What is your view on the need for a collective, industry-wide, comprehensive approach to this whole process of educating people?
The short answer is no, Satish. I think that there is, and it applies to, I think, both men and women borrowers. I think that credit industry has evolved a lot in the last 5 to 10 years. Everything from P2P, fintechs, to payday loans, to BNPL, and a bunch of other innovations have been thrown in the face of the customer. People suddenly have access to credit options they never had. You go to a Chroma to buy a fridge, and there are like 5 different options to take a loan there and then. We simply aren't doing enough to educate borrowers and potential borrowers on the risks of taking a loan and how to even evaluate what the right loan and credit for them is. I'm not sure what the right way to do that education is, but we definitely as an industry need to do more there.
Okay. So talking about education, and Jayesh, this is a question I have for you. Any quick, in the good old days, and when Avni introduced us, she put an age to me straight away by talking about the number of years that I had experience in. But in the good old days, it was, you had a salary slip, you had a tax return, we pulled out a calculator and we gave him a loan. And, like you said, the installment income ratio in housing was 25-30%. If I started a housing finance company today with an installment income ratio of 25-30, I wouldn't do business. The question, Jayesh, I have for you, and pardon me for asking you this, any advice on how to build a good credit score?
Okay. Yeah, you're right, Avni. And it was only, Avni mentioned that experience for two of us and didn't mention the experience for the rest of the panelists. So that, definitely was a bias anyways. But yeah, to answer your question, yes, credit score in, irrespective whether it's a woman borrower or a male borrower in the informal sector, it has to rely on a number of factors. It could be the kind of regularity of income, the consistency of income. So data on that needs to be collected, number of dependents, and of course the IARs and FOIs that would also play a role. And now with the credit bureaus, we have multiple other options that we can actually look at and collect data on and also build it into the score. So I think it's not as easy to build a credit score for people in the informal sector as it is for people in the formal sector. But definitely, I think, there can be, one of the reasons why it's difficult is also because there's not enough data there to really build a score on or to, actually learn from that.
Great. So I know we started a little late, but I'm going to try and catch up on time to respect everyone's time. So I have 2 or 3 last questions. Simi, I'm coming back to you. You rightly said ownership of businesses is low, and therefore automatically it extends to borrowing being low in the business segment. But there are a lot of women who do not approach banks for debt, for example, or they don't have access to the various complex debt products and instruments that are available. Again, it's a question of education, but is there anything else that needs to be done either from a regulatory or the IBA or any of these authorities or self-regulatory bodies?
I think it's really about awareness, because I think the government has done enough. And I think today, and I know a lot of women are not aware when we kind of, when I, for example, go and talk at industry associations or, all of these women forums, I don't know many women are aware that if you're starting a business today, unlike a man, you could walk into any public sector bank, your nearest SBI branch, and you will, if you have a proper business plan, if you know what you're going to set up, you will get a 10 lakh rupee collateral-free loan, right? So I think the government has done enough. I think what the banking industry needs to do more to make sure that the customers and potential customers are aware of these schemes and essentially build, I think, enough channels. I think pretty much the way microfinance is built, right? So microfinance went to the women. So similarly, I think we need to find channels to go to women and tell them that this is something that's available if you're starting a business or growing a business. This is how you build a business plan. This is what we expect in terms of documentation, because lending at the end of the day, formal lending is largely about paperwork. And I think it's really about how do we facilitate or help women create and complete their paperwork so that they can get to a loan sanction.
So I have another question for you. Is the marketing pitches made by the financial institutions male biased? The advertisements and the focus and all that. Yes, you'll have a nice looking woman there, but that's again not nice. That's not what the intention is. But it's always targeted to a male customer when it comes to taking the loan. Is that something that also needs to change in the context of awareness and, biases and all that?
The question is to me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, well, rightly said, while many of the marketing material that we see today does have a woman, we can look at making more women-centric marketing advertisements so that the awareness, like Simi rightly mentioned, is created. There is more education needed about how it benefits them, including what benefits are given by the government and how do they save being an applicant or a co-applicant on the loan. So that way, if a targeted marketing campaign is done, it will definitely serve the better interests of the community.
Okay, so there are a few questions we have. So I'm going to make one last comment and, I'm throwing it open to the panel. And then, Avni, will you read out the questions? How does it work?
Yes, sir, I'll read out.
Okay, just so, we talked about a lot of stuff from credit scores to new methods of lending to fintech to supposedly biases. And we've seen that it ranges. Some credit policies will have limitations about what to do with a father-daughter application. The microfinance industry, fortunately, has less of those and has better experience in this. So whatever issues are there in terms of giving loans to women, whether it's from awareness or whatever, has it been created by society, created by men, or are the women themselves responsible for that? Open question to any of the four panelists.
I'll take that if with permission of the other panelists. I don't think it's created by the women. It's certainly the industry that's created it, and I think the industry took the easy route out. It was easier to assess incomes and predominantly income in those days were incomes from male applicants, and they just did that, and the whole thing evolved. That's what my guess is.
Simi, any thoughts from you?
No, I agree. I don't think that these are conscious biases any longer. They may have started off as conscious biases. At this time, these are unconscious societal biases that we need to address.
Right. And is there a social divide in terms of urban, rural, for example?
I think, again, to the conscious bias element, I think microfinance has consciously solved it for rural India.
Right.
They went in and said, we want to solve this problem, we want to solve this for women. So which is why I think credit is far more pervasive for women in rural India today.
Got it. Would be anything from you on as a closing remark before we get to the questions?
Satish, I would say it is not the first or the second option. I think it's all three contributing to the problem. All three things that you mentioned, to some extent, each one of those causes have been responsible for where we are.
But I think there are winds of change and led by some of you.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, yes.
I think a lot of credit to go to each one of you. Hema, any closing remarks on this or anything else that we've talked about before we hand it back to Avni for any questions?
No, I absolutely echo what the other panelists say. I mean, and especially what Purvi said, I think it's contributed by each and every one that you specifically mentioned in some way or the other. That I think combined with the societal biases is why, we are where we are. So thank you. Thank you, Satish.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I think this has been good. We can go on and on, but obviously we are restricted by time. And it's a journey that has started, which is fast catching up, courtesy a lot of things that are happening at the social, at the government level, and more importantly, at the ground level, where each lender is learning from their own experiences and therefore being able to translate that into action on this whole aspect of women and credit. The pandemic has taught all of us lessons, but it has taught the women lessons also. So I think this has been fantastic. Thank you very much, all of you all. Avni, I'm going to hand it back to you for any of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mehta, and thanks to all our panelists for stepping out with your insights and valuable opinion on the challenges and trends in the credit industry vis-a-vis women. We will be having a brief Q&A session now. We have received a few questions on our contact us ID. These are open for any panelist to answer. So the question is, what kind of loans should an industry fresher take and which kind of loans to avoid?
Any one of the panelists, unless you want me to kind of, specifically.
I can take that.
Sure.
So as I mentioned, there are multiple bank loans available for what are called greenfield projects, which is that if you are somebody who has graduated, you have a plan to set up a business, and you have a business plan, you have all the other elements tied up, you can technically take a bank loan. We have seen founders, especially in the new age startup businesses, using things like credit cards to set up businesses. Please avoid that, right? Because credit card is the most expensive form of debt you can take. So, if you are looking for something that's cutting edge, you're a startup founder, go raise equity. If you're doing something that's conventional, setting up a factory, go take a bank loan. But don't take, don't use credit card debt, or don't use, expensive peer-to-peer fintech debt to fund what's a long-term business.
Sure.
Satish, can I add something? One more loan that should be avoided. I don't know whether it is right, given the way we are now getting used to new way of living. But even I see a lot of people taking loan for buying white goods when they really cannot afford it. They have a small TV and they want to buy a big 42-inch LCD, and then they are taking a loan, and then they are not able to service EMI, or a two-wheeler. Things that if you are not very confident of servicing the EMI, avoid taking loan for those white goods. Because, for example, buying a mobile, the model keeps changing so fast and you're so tempted to keep changing your mobile and buying the new mobile on loan. So, those are the kind of things that you should avoid in case if you can't afford it.
How did you know I change my mobile every year?
I keep an eye on all the important people.
All right. Yes, Avni, anything else? Any other question?
Yes, sir. Is crowdfunding a form of loan? Are there any repayment obligations for certain types of crowdfunding, or is all crowdfunding debt-free?
Anybody wants to take that? Simi, you want to take that, or Emma, you want to take it?
Sure, I can take that. So there are different kinds of crowdfunding, but as a concept, crowdfunding means that you have taken a project or a requirement to out in the world to a place like Kickstarter and said, I'm trying something new. Can somebody else pay for it or fund me for it? And depending on which platform you use and what the structure is, it can either be pay in kind. Kickstarter is the most common example of that, where you basically say, I'm going to make shoes. You pay for me upfront. When I start making shoes, I'll ship them over to you, right? That's the most common form of crowdfunding. But there are others where you kind of source a little bit of capital as equity capital, and you give up shares in your company or a business in exchange for getting the funding. There are also what are called peer-to-peer lending platforms that are also a form of crowdfunding, where you basically take a loan, small loan from many people who are out there, the retail investors. Like you and me can give like a 500 rupee loan, and combined a 10,000 rupee loan can go to somebody. So that's crowdfunding too. So depending on the platform you use and what kind of capital you raise, it can be either in return for what you're going to make and sell. It can be equity or it can be a loan.
Great. Yes, Avni, do we have another question?
No, sir. Yeah. So we thank the audience for those questions and our panelists for their response. It was indeed a fruitful session with many takeaways. Over to you, Ritika.
Thank you, Avni. The narrative that women needs to take charge of their finances is not new. However, what is often missed out are the nuances and nitty-gritties. What often goes a-bagging are the answers to specific questions that many women may have been but have gone unanswered. Questions like, do women need a different contingency strategy? Or how can women in the semi-urban areas start their financial planning journey? How should women...
I can just disturb you. If the session is over, then the panelists can leave from this session. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Purvi. Thank you, Simi, Emma.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Satish, and all the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. The narrative, how can women in the semi-urban areas start their financial journey? How should women career break, invest, and the like? We have on the anvil a very interesting fireside chat on this topic. I would now like to call upon our guest Ms. Renu Narayan, Regional Head, Karnataka, AP, Telangana, ICICI Prudential Asset Management Company Limited, to join us for this fireside chat. Ms. Narayan joined ICICI Prudential in 2004. In her current role, she is responsible for strengthening the AMC's business in Karnataka, Telangana, and Andhra Pradesh. She started her career with ICICI Prudential Asset Management Company as a management trainee in retail business in Hyderabad and held different positions in both retail and institutional businesses before her current role. In her previous role, she was responsible for institutional businesses in Karnataka and AP. She has an overall experience of about 17 years, and she is also a mathematics graduate, an MBA from NMIMS, Mumbai, and an MCA from the University of Kerala. Welcome, Ms. Narayan.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me over.
This chat will be moderated by Ms. Krishna Vadhe, a financial coach and expert at HerMoneyTalks. Ms. Vadhe is a chartered accountant, virtual CFO, business consultant, financial and tax expert, carrying over a decade of rich experience serving more than 500 plus happy global multinational companies, working with Big Four accounting firms. She has helped companies excel in their business maximization process and also a passionate speaker, trainer, author, and blogger. Welcome, Ms. Vadhe. The topic for today's fireside chat is inspiring women to take charge of their finances. Over to you, Krishna ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Ritika. So, women taking charge of their finances, as a very interesting session which was going on prior to this, and I heard about that where are the areas why women are stuck, right? And I think pandemic was the best time, although it had brought a lot of negativity and downfall. But one of the positive side of which I see is COVID brought in the realization in women that we now need to take charge of our finances. If we can take charge of our home and we are the best makers in using the resources very appropriately, any other resources of home, and we are home makers, home managers. So we do good with finances always. And it is not a rocket science, it's just a mindset which we need to change. When we change the mindset, everything around us changes. Right? With this, I would like to start the chat with Renu ma'am. And my first question to you would be that we have seen the narrative changing. Women are becoming financially independent and taking charge of their finance. What do you think are the primary reasons behind this sudden change?
Thank you, Krishna, for this question. So that's true. Gone are the days when women used to stand aloof from money matters. Today, women in our country are taking huge strides in almost every field, right? So rising wages, increasing employment, etc. have helped women take the center stage as far as managing their household finance is concerned. In fact, the nation's finance is also managed by a lady finance minister today. So that's the kind of progress that women have taken in almost every field, right? So women are increasingly becoming aware that true financial freedom does not come just from earning money, but from also being able to decide on how to put that money to use for a secure financial future. So I would say that, increasing awareness and digitization have made women financially savvy. So today women get actively involved and have completely taken charge of their, investments or their money, not only to create a secure financial future for themselves, but also in, having a comfortable, luxurious life as well. So taking charge is today not a choice anymore. I think it's a necessity. And as you rightly said at the beginning, I think the pandemic, one of the main reasons, and, there are many reasons, but probably the most recent one is definitely the pandemic. It has sensitized both women and men on the perils of not having planned for emergency funds, not having a health insurance, not having a term life insurance, and not having a passive income through investments. That's something that has definitely sensitized people to the importance of investments and taking charge of their finances. Also, women definitely have a greater need for financial planning than men for multiple reasons. We all know that the total earnings of a woman is probably lesser than a man in several fields because of the gender pay gap that exists or that is a reality in many fields even today. And the career breaks that women takes for caring for a newborn or for a sick family member also can lead to loss of salary, plus can push them a little behind in their careers, right? And we all today know that the life expectancy of a woman is much longer than that of a man. So that makes it also even more important for a woman to create a larger corpus to lead a comfortable retired life. So I think, better late than never, women. Yeah, I think better late than never, women definitely have started giving the importance to the right kind of importance to money matters that it deserves.
Right, very rightly said, ma'am, that women they have a long-term vision, they have the proper planning, and yes, of course, why is a necessity? Because women has to take charge. It's no more a choice. It is a requirement. It has become a life skill now. Right? So, adding on that. Why do you think that what are the most important things that women need to keep in mind when managing their finances, with the points which you said just?
Yeah, so I think to start with is to overcome any doubts about managing your own money, right? Anyone can do it either by themselves or with professional help. And before you start your investment journey, I think one should educate oneself and continue educating oneself through time. That's extremely important. And all women should actually plan to save first before they spend and ensure that the saved money is wisely invested for a secure future while enjoying the present. And some of the other general, concerns that women have, or, some of the points that definitely can be kept in mind is that extreme risk aversion. Sometimes we do associate risk aversion with women. So I think, extreme risk aversion can lead to losing out on significantly higher returns. So keeping too much money in the bank savings account or fixed deposits can actually lead to negative growth because, many a time the interest rates would be lower than the rate of inflation. So it is important that, you keep bank accounts probably as a source to park only, or as a means to park only emergency funds, or, to maintain liquidity. And it is also important to diversify your investments into financial assets because typically when you see there are a lot of women who have a tendency to park their funds completely into gold or similar physical assets, right? And another advice which I think, should be practiced by both women and men alike is that, one should practice asset allocation. That's extremely important. I think choice of assets depends on one's goals, risk appetite, time horizon, etc. But it is extremely important that you do not put all your eggs in the same basket because asset allocation can reduce the risk. If at all, there is some sharp price fluctuation that happen in any one of the assets, that gets mitigated by the performance of the rest of the assets. So that's extremely important. And when we speak about the different assets, I think one may invest into equity as an asset class, either by investing into stocks or by investing through the equity mutual fund route. Similarly, one may invest into debt as an asset class through probably a bank fixed deposit or a debenture or a bond or a debt mutual fund scheme. Similarly, gold is also an asset class that one may invest into through gold sovereign bonds or physical gold or a gold ETF, that is a gold exchange traded fund or a gold fund of fund. Similarly, we do have real estate also as an option. But one primary advice or, one strong recommendation from my side is that I think the proportion of financial assets has to be much more than what you would have in a physical asset. Thank you.
Okay, great. So, Renu ma'am, as you say that, individuals and women especially first need to do the saving to, like if I just put it in a nutshell, they need to save and then they need to see where they invest that savings. Like, when they invest, they have to have a balanced portfolio, not just going with completely risk aversion assets, because I feel anyways, females are more risk taker than men, because I take it that way. If women are getting married and coming to a new home, that is a bigger risk. So if they are adapted to that, then no other risk is bigger than that.
Right.
It is just the mindset. And then having a balanced asset, putting their money in equity, debt, physical assets, gold, real estate, putting more proportion into financial assets is what your recommendation, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So coming to the next one, how can a woman who are not financially dependent start their investment journey?
I think it can start, the starting point would definitely be savings. So create a corpus for emergency funds, followed by a term life insurance and health insurance for financial security, as well as income tax benefits, and then move to investments. So investments are a great way for both women and men to grow their income. Money, when it grows, it definitely comes handy to fund a vacation, to fund a vehicle, to fund a degree, to fund a home, to fund a new business, right? So I guess, investments is something that is important for everybody to have. Only thing is that, it is always good that if you start early, and even if the amount is small, start early, start small. So when I say start small, I'm reminded of this classic proverb, the best time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best is now. So I think, if you do not have an investment, I think this is the time to start an investment for sure. And also MFSIPs, mutual funds, systematic investment plans are a very good way to get started with your investment journey. Along with that, probably other conservative options to invest into or to start your investment journey would be by investing into strategies like a dynamic asset allocation fund or a multi-asset fund, because it offers a one-stop solution where you don't need to bother about where to place your funds, because the fund itself will take care of managing your money into different assets. So that would be my recommendation for anybody to start their investment journey.
Great. So having said these points, like, they should be investing in these portfolios and these asset classes. Still, why do you think that women should take charge of their money, and what are the mental blocks which stop women from investing even after knowing?
Right. So, as I said, today it's definitely not a choice anymore. It is a necessity that women take charge of their money. In terms of the mental blocks, I guess, women traditionally have been conditioned to believe that, men are more aware and are better decision makers when it comes to matters related to money or investments. The truth is that both make similar mistakes, right? So it definitely doesn't have a gender bias when it comes to the kind of mistakes that people can possibly make in the investment related matters. So even though women are great multitaskers and simultaneously managing their homes and offices, they find it very convenient to let the man decide on money matters. So the reasons could be, lack of interest or lack of time, or maybe, sheer negligence, right? So we've come across women who keep all their money only in bank accounts for years and years for safety, compromising on returns. This is due to lack of awareness and also sometimes wrong advice to stick to traditional conservative products, giving lower returns, even when they have a higher risk-taking ability. Also, the belief that, investments, or let's say, specifically mutual fund investments, is equal to equities, that is a risky asset class, right? Mutual funds invest into equity, into debt, into gold, depending on the investment objective of the scheme. Even in equity mutual funds, risk can be mitigated by investing smaller amounts every month or smaller amounts every week through the systematic investment plan or SIP route. Also by staying invested for a very long period of time, ignoring the intermediate volatility and the noise around it, right? And also by choosing to invest into, like I mentioned earlier, the dynamic asset allocation strategies or the multi-asset strategies. So these are some of the ways in which you can reduce risk. So, so these would be some of the mental blocks, and I'm sure the trend is reversing, and I'm sure the forums and discussions like these also will help to spread awareness, and I'm sure more and more women will be aware as with each passing day.
Yes, very rightly said that the awareness have already started, and more women are taking charge of their finances, even because they have been doing this from long. I think even if they go to a sabzi mandi and they do the bargaining, that is also a part of finance. It's just the mental blockage which it is restricting them to take the decisions. So I think more and more awareness can help them.
That's right.
So, what do you think? What kind of assets women should invest? Like, if you have any specific, kind of asset to suggest women.
Okay. So, financial planning is a very personal exercise and has to be done differently for each individual, right? What suits me might not be the one that would suit you, right? So all investors, women or men, I think, I'll just repeat the same thing, should practice asset allocation, that is diversify their investments into different asset classes based on their time horizon, risk appetite, return expectation, etc. But yeah, definitely to start with, I think the right instrument to keep aside funds for emergency needs or any contingency requirement can be into a liquid mutual fund or a bank savings account, right? Or a fixed deposit. Based on the various financial goals, like, buying a house, funding a child's education, or marriage, or starting a business, etc., there are many instruments to choose from. So I think it could be a judicious mix of mutual funds, stocks, bonds, PPFs, NSE, real estate, gold. One should seek actually the advice of a investment advisor or a mutual fund distributor to decide on the right mix of asset class that one needs to invest in. In this context, I would also like to say that mutual funds are a one-stop solution because it offers a plethora of products that can help meet all your financial goals. So these are managed by professional fund managers who have the right expertise. It is just that one should choose the right mutual fund scheme that can offer a reasonable return based on your risk profile and return expectations.
Okay. So you suggest that if as an individual I'm not aware of any asset class, I should start with mutual fund so that I get a hang of it.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So, and apart from having a contingency buffer for long-term investment, how should women spread their investment basket? What are the kinds of assets in which women should invest?
Right. So I'll take the first part first. So, as I said earlier, equity is the best asset class for the long term, right? One may choose to invest into equities directly into the stock market or through the mutual fund route. So this is the asset class which has the potential to beat the rate of inflation over the long term. One may choose to invest into an equity mutual fund also through the lump sum route or the systematic investment plan route. Which is to basically invest small amounts in regular frequencies to reduce the volatility and to take advantage of the price fluctuations. Also, the dynamic asset allocation strategies or the multi-asset strategies. So to answer to your second question, what are the kinds of assets in which the women should invest? I think, this was addressed in the previous part also. So all of the assets. So it is very unique to each individual. My risk profile would be different from yours. My return expectation could be different from yours. So that is something that is a complete exercise to be done. But yeah, so you have equities, you have debt, you have gold. So there are multiple asset classes to pick and choose from based on your based on one's financial needs.
Okay, great. So for long-term perspective also, it will differ from person to person. So we should not I think you suggest that if my friend is doing a particular investment portfolio and he has a portfolio, I should not just replicate it.
But definitely for the long term, when we say long term, if it's 15 years, 20 years, the one asset class that has a proven track record is definitely equities. which you may invest directly if you have the right expertise and the right advice. Otherwise, mutual fund is the safest route through which you may invest. You may take exposure to equities.
Okay, great. So, Renu ma'am, there is a perception that women are more inclined towards traditional forms of investment, as you also mentioned. So, is it time to break free from this bias too? And have they already broken the bias? Like gold jewelry versus gold ETF would be a classic example to quote. Like, do you think this is an example, and has the biasness been broken already?
Right. I think, so many women have already broken free. Many of our investors today are women who invest amounts ranging from a few thousands to several crores. In fact, seasoned women investors are showing an increasing appetite to look beyond mutual funds and are looking at advanced products like portfolio management services and alternate investment funds. Having said that, we in India definitely have a huge bias towards physical assets like gold and real estate. And most of our savings get invested in these. And both are emotional assets, which means that, it is a very difficult decision for anyone to actually liquidate these assets, right? Yeah, so it's a very difficult decision. And from an investment perspective, if you look at gold or real estate, both of them, the return profile, the returns can be very cyclical in nature, which means that there can be long periods when they give very good returns. There can be long periods when the returns are negative, and there can be long periods when there are no returns also. In fact, real estate can be illiquid also, while financial assets like mutual funds can be liquidated in parts. When it comes to real estate, I don't think any of us can sell just one bedroom or only the kitchen of the house to create liquidity, right? So while the physical assets like real estate and gold definitely needs to be part of anyone's overall asset allocation, but it should not be the primary one and should definitely be lower in comparison to financial assets like mutual funds. Coming to your the second part of your question, which is on gold ETFs versus gold jewelry. I think gold jewelry looks best when it's worn and not when it is stashed away in a locker for investments. So regarding gold jewelry versus gold ETF, let me say that anyone who invested in a gold ETF or a silver ETF on their phone after watching the Russian invasion of Ukraine and saw their thesis getting validated would have really felt the power of financial products in this information age. Right now, in terms of actually looking at the advantages, if I have to speak about the advantages of gold ETF versus physical gold or gold jewelry, there are some distinct advantages. One, when it comes to gold ETF, one need not worry about storage or theft because you hold it in the digital format or in a demat form. Also, the cost of acquisition for a gold ETF is not there because there are no making charges which gold jewelry otherwise would have. And obviously, there is a flexibility in buying and selling because you can do that on the stock exchange and you can do it on your phone. It's as easy as that. And also, when it comes to buying gold jewelry or physical gold, one needs to have a large corpus to start investing. When it comes to gold ETFs, that is not the case. Even with small amounts, as low as 1,000 rupees per month, also you can take exposure to gold as an asset class. Yeah.
Right. Like, I think that will again depend from person to person. Like some would like to invest in jewelry itself and have them worn. And so higher literacy rates and better network connectivity and access to financial service providers, autonomy over the use of cell phones, and familiarity with using digital tools for financial tasks have made it possibly for a larger number of urban women to learn how to manage their money. However, this picture is different in semi-urban and rural areas. So my question to you is, how can such women start their financial journey and learn the art of saving and investing who are not very technically friendly?
Yeah, so I think semi-urban and rural women are also open to new investment ideas. And today we have the industry bodies working very constantly to increase awareness amongst the entire population, not just women or men, and not just, women or men from urban areas, but also in semi-urban as well as the whole population. And I'm sure, even forums like this also should help increase awareness, across our population. So anyone with a PAN card and a PAN card, a bank account, and a valid address proof today can invest into mutual funds from anywhere in the country. Whether you're located in an urban area or a semi-urban area. Having said that, today it is a reality that banks, mutual funds, mutual fund distributors, etc., have already penetrated into the semi-urban areas. So I'm sure most of the leading mutual funds have physical branches in semi-urban areas. That is there. But more importantly, I think with internet on your fingertips and internet banking, I think investments have become very easy. Today, one can also access informative videos, educational videos in multiple regional languages on the internet. So, as more awareness spreads into these areas, I think any investment that can be accessed by people in urban areas can be accessed by people in rural areas as well. Semi-urban areas, it is already there.
Okay. So you mean they can also have, just with the PAN card, Aadhaar card, and identity proof, they can also start with their mutual fund account as easily as people or women in urban areas, right?
And a bank account also.
And a bank account, yes, of course, and a bank account. So now, what investment tips would you give to women who are on career break, who does not have the money flowing in? And when we say that regularly we should keep on investing, so if they are on a career break, that means they are in a financial break also. So what advice do you give them?
So I look at it from two perspectives. So one is that I think, if you're on a career break, I think it is the perfect backdrop for someone to kickstart their investment journey, because you have a lot of time to actually educate yourself, right? In fact, the break or the period should be used not only to educate oneself, but also to create a base for helping others also with their financial planning. And I'm sure later they could get into becoming advisors, or even get into trading, right? So today there are many websites, many channels, and several courses that are there to help women increase their expertise in wealth management, investing, risk management, etc. So that is one part of it. This is the time when you need to use to educate yourself so that you can manage your money, and also probably take that also as a career option to help more women and more men come into the mutual fund stream and benefit out of, or help others make their wealth grow, right? In terms of the investment tips, I think it again depends on the specific situation the person is in, whether they already have a large corpus in their hand, right? But maybe some of the basic tips would be that, because there is no income stream expected immediately, I think people should have a proper monthly budget. That's point number one. The expenses that can be postponed to a later date, I think should be postponed to a later date. And if let's say, you do not have a health insurance or a life insurance, specifically when you have other people financially dependent on you, I think, those are the first things that one should get into. And of course, from an investment perspective, I don't think that is the right situation for anybody to take extra risk. So you should choose a conservative product from where you can expect a regular income flow until you find the next job. So that can again be, I've been repeatedly saying this. I think, the dynamic asset allocation plan, from where you can start a systematic withdrawal to get monthly income, would be an ideal one. But again, there is no one recipe for all. It depends on the individual specific situation, based on which one needs to decide how the allocation needs to be done.
Okay, so you suggest women who are on career breaks, so first, to be financially independent, try for some other courses, or be an investment advisor or financial advisor. And then they need to take charge of the finances, checking what is their monthly budget, and then expenditures which can be delayed, and then they thinking from saving perspective, if they can move towards a dynamic allocation. All right. So I think it was really wonderful to have a discussion with you, Renu ma'am, on various aspects of finance for women, which is, I think, not a choice anymore. It has become a necessity, a requirement, a life skill. And we women need to create more and more awareness so that more and more women can be empowered and be financially independent on this front. Thank you so much. It was lovely talking to you. Over to you, Ritika.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Vadir, and thank you to our speaker, Ms. Narayan, for those wonderful pearls of wisdom and inspiration to all women out there. We have a few questions for Ms. Narayan from our audience. So if there is a woman in between jobs in her 40s, so what should they focus on, their earning potential or making money work for them?
Yeah. So in the 40s, I'm assuming that, the person would have a reasonably good earning potential. So the idea definitely has to be, I think the first step definitely should be to create a corpus, to meet your expenses during your retired life, for which, again, you have a plethora of products to choose from as far as a mutual fund, mutual fund schemes are concerned. So a woman in 40s definitely should work on, assuming that the person will have a 10 to 15 years sort of a career ahead, can choose equity as the primary asset class where they may invest in, and of course should have exposure to all the other asset classes also.
Thank you, ma'am. Women and gold are inseparable. How can we get women or out of that bias and invest more in other riskier investments so that they can get more returns? Though we have covered this, but we would like you to add some points.
Right. So I don't think, we need to get women completely out of gold as an asset class. Definitely that also should be part of anybody's overall portfolio. But yeah, I think with increasing awareness and I'm sure women will also start looking at diversifying their portfolio, and we're already seeing it. Like I mentioned, we have today plenty of investors who are women who are investing into almost every asset class, getting into advanced products like portfolio management services and as well as alternate investment assets. So I think with awareness and by sitting down with the financial planner, I'm sure there are different other avenues also to invest in, not just in gold. Yeah, so it is not a difficult task for anybody to get executed the moment you set your mind to diversifying your portfolio.
Thank you, ma'am. Given the current volatility in the market, is it safe to stay invested for the next 6 months, or if we fresh investments to be made from start to get like into any different kind of asset class?
Right. So now currently the situation that is ahead of us is something that is linked to a geopolitical risk, and we are not very sure how long this will pan out. So, and one should not actually exit at these points, right? When there is huge volatility and when you have already seen a good amount of value that has eroded, specifically when the long-term growth story of India or the long-term growth prospects of equities are intact, I would not recommend that this is the time for anybody to exit. In fact, on the other hand, this is the time for somebody to add on more money. If you actually look at the recent highs of the equity markets, which I think was in October 2021, from then to now, the markets have corrected by almost 15%. And so these are times when one could incrementally add allocation into equity rather than thinking of exiting. And because we wouldn't know, how much more fall could happen, or if this is the how much more fall could happen, it is best to add on through a staggered fashion. You invest through the SIP route or the STP route, which is basically staggering your investments in a monthly or a weekly fashion. That would be the ideal step to take.
Right. Thank you, ma'am. I will thank the audience for those questions and our speaker for her valuable inputs. Now we are closing the fireside chat. And now over to you, Manisha.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ritika. It has been a day replete with incisive insights, compelling opinion, and intellectual fervor. As day one comes to a close and we look forward to day two, we would like to take a moment to thank our partner organizations and collaborators. HerMoneyTalks would like to place on record its heartfelt gratitude to Mirae Asset, our lead partner, for having helped give shape to our vision of this event and for their collaboration throughout. We would like to express our deep sense of gratitude to BAC India, ICICI Prudential AMC Limited, and Quantum AMC for their wholesome support and being our event partners. Next, we would like to thank Swatantra Micro Housing Finance Corporation and Pahal Financial Services for the support and partnering with us for this event. Our deep sense of appreciation goes out to Athena eLearn, our knowledge partner, and Mr. Satish Mehta for his guidance and collaboration. Finally, we would like to place on record our gratitude to all our community partners, Confederation of Women Entrepreneurs of India, ECHI, Happily Ever Lens, the She Saga, AAPC, and 91 Springboard. Tomorrow promises to be another exciting day with many more power-packed talks, panel discussions, and educative sessions in the offing. Tomorrow's session starts at 4 p.m. Indian time, so hope to see you all there tomorrow. For now, it's a goodbye from all of us at HerMoneyTalks.
Thank you all. Thank you, team from HerMoneyTalks end.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.